I ran out of their house so fast, and you won't believe why. Roaches. Roaches everywhere. Everywhere. Stove, oven, behind the clock. Everywhere. I had nightmares for a week. The dad in the 90s was an alcoholic sheet metal worker. He's sober now, but my friends and I were swimming when he came home. He stumbled into the backyard and flopped into the pool fully clothed with work boots. He was floating face down like a corpse. I asked my friend if we should get him out. He seemed unconcerned, saying his dad was a scuba diver and could hold his breath a long time. The mum came out yelling at the dad, who just started blowing bubbles face down. I left. I met someone at a rather sketchy bar, and she invited me to her place deep in the forest. It was a trailer, and when we got inside, I noticed that all the doors had been removed inside and had sheets covering them instead. There was no power, and a couple of steps in, it felt like I almost fell through the floor, and I noticed a few spots that were sagging because of water damage. I have to admit that I was still tempted to see where this was going, but the feeling of, yeah, this looks like a place where you get murdered in a horror movie, was stronger, so I pretended I forgot something in my car and sped off. I was installing security alarms in college in Wisconsin. I was told that there was one room that they specifically wanted every kind of sensor in. Motion detector, glass break, window, door. I walk in and it's a literal shrine to the leader of the Third Reich, along with a ton of Third Reich memorabilia. I say, sure, no problem, go out to my truck and just leave. I called my manager and told him what's up, and he said we shouldn't be sending any other techs out there. I will say the whole vibe of the home was messed up to begin with, starting from the front door. Crazy amount of Egyptian stuff around, Knights of Columbus and Freeman stuff scattered around. The whole place gave me the willies. My ex kicked me out of the house, rightfully, and I didn't have anywhere to go until an old-time friend said I could go to her place. She wasn't there, but said to let myself in. I walked in, and there was trash and dirty diapers everywhere, plates of old food on the stairs and the bedrooms, trash piled ankle-height through the whole place, and oh god, the smell. I walked out with my suitcase and told her I found somewhere else. I haven't been back since, although she invites me over every time we see each other out and about. Oh, sweet God! The best part is that you didn't say whether she had kids or not. Honestly, this becomes a lot funnier if she didn't. I mean, if she did, someone at least needs to do a wellness check on them. The other funny alternative is just you accidentally going into the wrong place. The bathroom. It was the worst thing I'd ever seen. The filthy tub was filled with dirty clothes that solidified into a black, foul-smelling gunk. The place was beyond filthy. Used Q-tips everywhere, no toilet paper, and no toilet seat. I was there until I got someone to drive my sister and I home, but one of the kids who lived in the house was actually lying on the filthy stuff in the tub as I left. My sister and I speak of this house to this day, and it was well over 40 years ago. Reminds me of the one time I visited my close friend's house. I don't know how to say this in a kind way, so I'll just say it in a rude one. She was morbidly obese and always had a strong, unpleasant smell. I was used to it, and I liked her as a person, so it didn't really matter to me. But I'd always assumed that it was just due to improper bathing habits. I got to her house and it was unthinkably dirty. Dirty dishes everywhere in the kitchen to the point that there was no counter space. The floor was so dirty I could feel the grit through my socks, and my socks had turned black on the bottom by the time I left. The bathroom had holes rotted through the ceiling and floor. The tub was full of random junk. Toilet was literally solid brown and black on the inside. She also didn't warn me that her entire family, mum, dad, grandma, grandpa, and 2 cousins lived there, and that her cousin is special needs and very pushy, which totally would have been fine and I would have still visited if I knew. I was just blindsided by him and didn't have time to prepare myself for a large grown man wanting to hold onto my arm and pet my head the whole time I was eating, so that made me really uncomfortable. I didn't know to expect any of that, and I was 15, so I'd been driven there by my friend's mum. I was too embarrassed to call my mum to pick me up or to ask my friend's mum to drive me home, especially since it was a 40-minute drive, so I just ended up eating food cooked in that very dirty kitchen and sleeping on a towel laid on the very dirty floor. It wasn't very fun. I lived in an apartment. Many times when I was coming and going to work, the lady that lived next door would be sitting on the floor outside her door. I'd always stop and say hello or ask if she was all right. I'd found out from management she was a highly educated professor from one of the Ivy League universities, but had had a mental breakdown. One day, coming home from work, she was waiting in the elevator for me in a total state of panic. She has to show me something. She takes me to her door, tells me I need to leave all of my electronics outside, She opens the door, and I step inside to see that every square inch of her apartment is covered in tinfoil. She then went on a rant about people spying on her, showing me a bottle of Mrs. Butterworth's pancake syrup and explaining how it was watching. Yeah, that night we contacted her family. She was in the hospital for a few weeks after that. Their parents were fighting hard, throwing stuff at each other. I was a child, just wanted to go to my friend's house to play. There were other kids crying. I immediately said to myself, maybe another time. Her dad had his machete collection out and was sharpening them. He was talking to them like they were his friends. It was really bizarre. The guy was obsessed with knives and blades. We decided to play at my house that night. Eventually, that guy tried to kill my friend's mum with one of his blades. It was a whole ordeal. I lost my friend overnight. Her mum moved her away and didn't give out any contact details. Picked up a girl for the first date. She invited me in, I sat down with her dad, and he asked me if I wanted a beer or two, then asked me if I wanted to watch the Playboy channel while waiting for his daughter to get ready. Felt like a setup to get his daughter pregnant and out of the house. I was outie real quick. Never saw her again. Wow, that's the opposite of what it's usually like meeting the dad. Went to a party once while I was in high school. Had some beers in the backyard around a fire, and I was just hanging out. Went into the house to go to the bathroom, saw a couple of guys snorting lines with weapons out on the table. The vibe inside was way different than the chill outside, and it very much just felt bad. I used the bathroom, grabbed my friend, and we left immediately. House got raided by the cops about 2 hours later, and a couple of people got arrested. So glad that I listened to my intuition. I hope they don't think I knocked on them. I didn't leave immediately, but wanted to. All of the doors locked from the inside, and only their dad had the keys. Neighbors invited me inside because I'd lost my house keys. We watched original Star Trek for a bit because that was apparently one of the shows they were allowed to watch. Nice enough people, but complete weirdos in hindsight. Met a stranger through a temp agency at a job site that didn't quite pan out, so we hung out for the rest of the day. He started getting drunk immediately, 9 a.m., but I was driving and didn't really mind it. We went to his house and it was nice and clean. Effort had been put in to keep it that way. I was around 21 at the time, and this guy was well into his 40s. Anyway, shortly after we got there, his wife came home and started screaming at him, threatening to call the cops and reprimanding him for bringing this white boy into our house. They were both black and I'm white. He was yelling back, throwing insults and threats and telling me to stay. I told her she had a lovely home and thanked her for having me over. I don't know if she heard me, she was screaming at him the whole time, so I promptly left. I always thought that guy should have left as well because she was making it quite clear that he wasn't welcome there, but it didn't seem like he was listening. Third Reich memorabilia displayed everywhere. His absent father is German, and for some reason he associated this side of him to that period in Germany. It was a way to honor his culture, even though his father was never really part of his life. His father lives in Florida, and this person lives in California. As far as I know, you don't really see this happening in Germany. And I think given what little I know, if you got caught with that stuff over there, you would face charges. It's like those Americans that get really into the Confederacy, but like a step sideways? Only in America, I guess. Also, weird that this has happened twice so far in this video. I think collecting some of that stuff within a limit is fine, but to display it, to show it off to others is a little bit too much. Yeah, unless you've got a photo of a family member or yourself standing next to the original owner like a hunter with a buck, I'd say it's not something you want to show off. Went to dinner at a family member's house, and they fixed the plates for everyone. I asked them not to put peas on my plate because I hate them, and I was told, in this house we eat what's served. I was a grown woman, and I walked out. My ex's house. Dog do and the stink of pee in the living room and dining room. Then there was a pile of festering food and dirty dishes in the kitchen. Okay, this one is gross. I can relate to it in some ways. Went to a sleepover at a friend's house in high school, and when she showed me the bed I'd be sleeping on, I had literal tears in my eyes. The mattress was soaked in cat pee. Her mom laughed it off while chugging a beer. Meanwhile, my friend, always perfectly put together at school. Surreal doesn't begin to cover it. Went with my friend to another friend's house for some, herbs. The friend of a friend had another friend who took it upon himself to show us his newly acquired, unregistered firearm. Trigger control was not being maintained. I suddenly remembered that I'd left my money in the car, and we were out sans herbs. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? In high school, my friend's house, they had like 5 or 6 Shar-Peis. The smell, oh god, the smell. I left as soon as I could and never went back. Walked into a party hosted by a co-worker, one of my early inside sales days jobs, and her and a couple of friends were snorting white snow off the kitchen counter. We weren't making much money at this job. Several people in the living room that most definitely didn't work with us were watching everyone like hawks. I made it roughly 3 minutes and left without saying anything to anyone. Overwhelming bad juju in the air. I found out later that the out-of-place guys were her dealer and his gang-affiliated friends. Frickin' wild. Guy I knew insisted on showing me his new pistol. Not much of a weapons guy, but sure, I'll admire your new toy. While showing me how to chamber a round, the muzzle crossed in front of my body. I held up my hands and said, "Whoa, take my money." Really meaning, don't point your damn weapon in my direction. Figured the message would be clear. Minute or so later, he did it again, and I suddenly remembered an urgent appointment. My friend told me this story. Her and her boyfriend went to his house to pick him up for a night out. He wasn't quite ready when they got there, so they were waiting in the kitchen and noticed a weird organic scent, like something gone bad. They looked for it everywhere and finally opened up his cupboard. In there, they found a tray with several rows of Dixie cups, all marked Mike's Swimmers. They left and never saw Mike again. Yeah, I walked into my dealer's house halfway through a raid. Quickest 180 I ever did. Masses and masses of cheesy adult movies on VHS. Literal walls of them, stacked up by the TV. This was my dad's place too, by the way. I went to visit a buddy who lived in Jack's Beach with my wife. The 3 of us went to a couple friends of his place before we went out. This couple had 3 St. Bernards. I kid you not, there were huge piles of dog doo all over the place. Think that scene in Jurassic Park. And this was a big, nice home. My wife and I still can't believe it. 1970, went upstairs to go to the other bathroom at a party. Saw a guy preparing to shoot up in a bedroom. Spoon, lighter, strap around the bicep. Did a 180 and got right out of there. First and only time I used the $20 bill my dad made me wear inside my bra for a taxi. When I was a kid, my dad was taking me to a new friend's house for a playdate. When we walked in, he saw a gat just sitting out on the table completely unsecured. We turned around and left, and from then on, I could only play with that friend at my house. Yep, I went into a client's house and there were roaches crawling everywhere. I've never been more repulsed. Ended up at some unknown house about half an hour outside Boston for afters when the goth club closed. I was 17 and definitely too young to be at that club to begin with. Started noticing a lot of World War II crap stashed on shelves and in corners. Accidentally opened the door to what had to have been the host's bedroom when trying to find the bathroom to throw up. Big old flag with a Totenkopf and a double S above the bed. I guess extra points for not just going with the commonplace symbol of the Third Reich. Backed out fast. Got to the right room, left several shots worth of bottom shelf whiskey behind, found my ride and convinced them to leave by telling them my actual age. I wasn't making good choices at this time of my life, alright? Never knew whose house that was. Hung the toilet paper the wrong direction. Instantly blocked all contact. This one shook me to the core. Huge spiderwebs with a spider in the corner of every room. When I alerted my cousins of the spider, my cousins looked at me like I was crazy and said, "The spiders eat the bugs," as there's little baby roaches crawling all over the dishes in the sink. Ugh. Yeah, my brothers and I got out of there so fast and just went back to my grandparents. Unfortunately, a Klan statue on top of the refrigerator. No way I'm getting past that. Yeah, my dad had a favorite uncle, and when he died, he and my mum helped me clean out his house. Inside an old blanket chest, they found his Klan robes and several accounting books logging who had paid their monthly dues. Uncle had been the treasurer, and the book included the last several mayors, pretty much every cop in town, and most of the civic leaders. Plot twist, this wasn't Alabama or Mississippi, but Upper Michigan. Had no idea the Klan did so well there, but they did. Mom still has the blanket chest. Whoa. I mean, I feel like you'd really need to consider what to do with that information. On the one hand, maybe people should know. On the other hand, how do you distribute that without being unalived? Went to dinner at daughter-in-law's parents. There was a cat turd. on the stove. So many candles lit and scent things plugged in, instant migraines for me, so I had to step out. The undressed photos of his wife on every wall in the apartment, right after he'd introduced me to his wife. Awkward. I was a Chevy Astrovan driver. There's apparently a following for this. Met a fellow Chevy Astrovan owner on a dating app and met for coffee. They wanted to show me their van. When I got in, I realized it was gutted with only a bare mattress, toilet paper, and a bucket in the back. He was living out of it, and not in the glorified van life way. I got out promptly and went back home. I have one weird memory that made me never go back to my friend's house. I was like, 7 or 8. I decided to go to my friend's house for the first time. She always came to mind before that. We were looking for something, I don't know what, and I was following her around, not knowing where stuff was in her house. She opened the door to her bathroom while her older brother was in the shower. She acted like this was totally normal and started searching around in the bathroom while continuing to talk to me like this was normal. Her brother also didn't care. I barely even talked to boys before that, so it made me so wildly uncomfortable. Also, they kept a paddle with holes in it on their wall as a reminder to not act up. Friend said that her parents do use it, it's not for show. I cried so much, I called my parents and asked them to come pick me up after 30 minutes, and I never went back. A bunch of substances. I've never seen so many pills and herb. At the time, I didn't know what the white substance was, but I left the moment I noticed all that stuff. Actually never hung out with that friend since that day. I was 15 years old. Fleas. Not me, but I was helping a friend move. We got to a point where the furniture was arranged, table was in place, a lot of the stuff in boxes. Neighbors came by to introduce themselves. Middle-aged, cute, very polite women. Having a great conversation when the mood unexpectedly shifted, and they made every excuse to find the door, but were still polite. We looked at each other and confirmed that that was weird. About 5 minutes later, I noticed a stack of VHS tapes by the TV. Oh, we left our naughty movies out. Equivalent to busty B-words and Heat, Debbie Goes Downtown, that kind of thing. I was laughing uncontrollably, pointing at the tapes when he came into the living room. He realized what they'd seen and started laughing too. I was a home health aide. One house had the bathtub, sink, and commode filled with duty. The kitchen had rats, mice, and roaches coming and going in the fridge. And they were hoarders. How the hell was I supposed to bathe that woman? I had to put my gloves on before I got to the front door with that place. Mice popping up from the stove. I noped out of there real quick. I went to a friend's house for the first time and her younger brother's dirty diapers were all over the kitchen and living room floor. It stunk. I pretended that I'd left something at home and ran out of there so fast. A Third Reich flag above the fireplace. How about smelled? My friend opened their front door and it stunk of number 2. I couldn't go inside, it was that bad. Went to a house, it was messy and hoardy, but that's not a deal breaker. However, there was a congealed gallon jug of milk on the kitchen table just sitting there with other food. Could not leave fast enough. They had a rotten turkey from Christmas in their fridge. It was March. Hillbillies pulling weapons on each other at a house party. Goodbye. An axe hidden behind his couch that he reached for when we sat down on it together. I walked into the kitchen and one of their friends was cooking smack in a toaster oven. I went over to a co-worker's new apartment who had recently relocated. She drove up in her own car and the moving company was a few days behind. She packed the absolutely necessary items for the few days without her stuff. I peeked in the closet and found a life-sized cardboard cutout of Donald Trump. Needless to say, I never went back. So back in the day, I personally knew Sharon Lorette from BME Zine, a body modification website. He used to have these barbecues at his house in Toronto during the summer months, and I used to go to these events. We're talking suspension towers, truck pulls, all sorts of body modification shenanigans. A good friend of mine who's a tattoo artist went to university with him and explained why his bathroom was so frickin' gross. Shannon believed that bacteria and infection was encouraged by adding water to dirt, so his bathroom had never been cleaned with water. It literally had piles of dirt in the corner of his bathroom and a shelf full of sounding tools. Google it, but don't blame me for what you find. I backed the F out of there so fast and went to a public toilet down the street at McDonald's. Gross would be an understatement. Rest in peace, Shannon. Runaway brides and grooms, why they ditched their fiancés at the wedding. My mum thought she'd been left at the altar by not only my dad, but the minister as well. She hated being the centre of attention and didn't look up from the ground until she was almost down the aisle. When she did, there was nobody waiting for her. Just then, the door behind the altar flew open and my dad ran out with his kilt flapping around, followed by the minister. Apparently, they'd been drinking whiskey in the minister's office and hadn't realised the ceremony had started. This is maybe the most Scottish story I've ever heard. A guy I knew did this. He was a nice, laid-back guy marrying a really nasty person. I can't really get into the details because I didn't know him too well, but apparently his friends had been telling him to break it off from the beginning. They had a final intervention for him the morning of the wedding, and they finally convinced him to just leave. He showed up at this festival I was at during what was supposed to be his wedding day. I saw him and said, "Oh, hey man, aren't you getting married today?" And he had this kind of faraway look and said, "Yeah, that's not happening anymore." Not the altar, but I bailed just 2 days before we were headed to the city hall. It was a green card marriage. On our second date, she mentioned that her visa was expiring in 6 months, and I jokingly proposed to her. We continued dating, we were falling for each other, and that proposal became much more real as the deadline approached. I backed out at the last minute because we just didn't agree on a few details. Living arrangements and finances were easy. What couldn't be negotiated was how seriously either of us wanted to take those vows. I wanted to at least attempt to be a married, monogamous couple. She didn't really want to commit to that. If she falls deeper in love, great. If not, we're just roommates. I miss her, but I think I dodged a bullet. I believe she probably would have just vanished on me at some point, and I could have been in a real jam over immigration crime. I mean, at least she was honest. I'm not saying that you should have done it, no way in hell I would have, but if she was a monster, she would have just lied to you. I didn't technically leave him at the altar, but 10 days before the wedding, I figured out he was sleeping with someone else. It took me 2 days to decide not to get married. Then over the next 3 weeks, I discovered he was addicted to whoopee and had been seeing other people for the entire 9 years we were together. Got real close to being stuck in that nightmare. I'm thankful every day that I didn't go through with it. I'm dealing with a husband with the same issue now, 6 months after the wedding. I wish I'd known beforehand. This is the worst time of my entire life. Well, most of our top-rated stories so far don't actually have the person waiting until the vows for their grand realization, but on balance, that's probably a good thing. It's way better to spare people that public humiliation on top of breaking their hearts and wasting their money. One of my best friends broke her engagement only a month before her wedding after he joked about kicking her in the face because he thought she hugged her stepbrother for far too long at her mum's anniversary party. She dodged a huge bullet since he was arrested for assaulting someone a year later. Not quite at the altar, but I was left several weeks before my wedding. And by left, I mean my fiancé insisted he was stressed out with work and needed some time. When in reality he wanted to move his new pregnant girlfriend into our house while I was out of town. So, the initial aftermath was indescribable, frankly. About 85% of our wedding was set up. Calling and explaining this to vendors was a total blast, believe me. I lived in and was getting married in the south, so if I never hear, "Oh bless your heart" again, it'll be too soon. Not to mention the crippling depression I fell into and the loss of a whole life I'd built with someone who I trusted. I didn't leave my parents' house for over a month afterwards. I also had to deal with my family and his and our friends, since he felt no reason to explain this to his side or anyone else and just assumed I'd do it, or they'd figure it out, I guess. To say this was a disaster is a huge understatement. I'm still recovering, mostly financially, but therapy has done wonders. My ex has a lot of mental issues and he's hid them well. And I've got to a place where I know I'm better off and that I dodged a huge bullet. I also recently started seeing a man who makes my heart race when he walks into a room. It's a beautiful thing. I got left at the altar. He spent the previous day spending a lot of time with his ex instead of helping me set up. I yelled at him about it because he was late and hadn't helped at all. He said he didn't want to get married because spending time with his ex made him realize I wasn't as fun as he was because I was uncomfortable with him doing substances. I kicked him out and still had the party. I told him to use that time to go home and pack up all of his crap. And he did. Then he got into smack and other stuff, so just yay. I left my ex-fiancée a month before the wedding. Backstory, I never actually proposed to her. She more or less did it to me. We were in a mall and she wanted to go to a jewelry store to look at engagement rings. I wasn't expecting to walk out of there with one, but we did. The salesperson even did a just engaged Polaroid for us. She became more and more controlling, and I couldn't take it anymore. After I left, her friend texted me on the day of the supposed ceremony telling me the cake was delicious. My ex somehow managed to break into my email and asked me who a girl was in an email I received after I'd left her. I could understand her reasoning, if it was before, but it wasn't. She also texted me a while after I left and told me she had missed her period. An hour later, I got another text that said, "Never mind, I'm pretty sure I dodged a bullet by leaving." Wasn't me personally, but if anyone here has any objection, speak now or forever hold your peace. A woman in the back stands up and says, "The groom can't be married as he's my husband." Turns out the woman who objected and the groom were in fact married and tried to get divorced, but the divorce was never completed. So technically the groom was still married and the wedding didn't proceed. I left her on the day before the wedding because on the bachelor party for me, one of her friends, who'd come with us as a "keep an eye on him so he doesn't sleep with an exotic dancer" insurance, drunkenly confessed that he knew my fiancé cheated on me with some D-bag for the last 2 months, all because she wanted one last fling. I also found out that some of my friends knew about it but didn't tell. She denied it but eventually confessed and tried to justify. We broke up, of course. I ended up having to sue her for all of the wedding payments I'd put out because I couldn't get back most of the down payments I paid, and her family wouldn't help with the wedding because they're cheap skunks. I won, and I got all of my money back because she was afraid it would be known. I found out the D-bag is actually one of the bosses at her work and he's married. The last I heard of her, she got knocked up by said D-bag, and he got custody of their child, and she's living with her parents with no job, wasting her life away. It's always the ones that are super paranoid that you'll cheat, because they're already doing it. People expect others to do what they do. I left a man at the altar. I was in my dress and getting ready to go to the chapel, when I realized I just couldn't. I froze. I didn't love him as much as I craved the safety and security that being married would bring. I was fairly recently divorced and very young and scared. He eventually found a lovely woman and they're very happy together. I don't think either of us would have had that with each other. It's good to hear that he found happiness elsewhere. Ultimately, you did the right thing. It's much harder and more expensive to get divorced than it is to break up. My brother left his fiancée a week before the wedding. Basically, as soon as he proposed, all she cared about was the wedding. He wanted a very small wedding and she wanted a huge one. She was also very religious, as her father was a preacher and he wasn't at all. She told him she wanted him to become a deacon in her father's church, and he told her no, he didn't want to do that. Pretty much they were disagreeing on everything after the proposal. Finally, he called it off. He said it was the hardest thing he's ever had to do, but he knew he made the right choice. Well, I typed 46th Street into the GPS, but it was actually on 64th Street. Nobody gets married on 46th Street. I was the one who was left at the altar while she didn't show up. Everything was normal in the months, weeks, and days before the wedding. She was excited, busily planning and organizing, then she just didn't show up on the day. I'd say that she might write her story here, but "I'm a fricking self-centered witch" isn't much of a story, is it? Her explanation to me was that she changed her mind. I've only spoken to her a few times since then, and that's the best I've got out of her. Saying she changed her mind is pretty rich coming from a girl who could never decide what to have for dinner. Not bitter at all. Why do you ask? It happened to 2 friends I used to know. He was totally smitten with her, she was highly insecure, and they used to fight a lot because she'd accuse him of looking at other women and other crazy stuff. She's never not been in a relationship, and she always has the next guy lined up before she leaves the current one. I guess this time it was no different. Days before the wedding, she called it off. We find out she's shacked up with the next one within weeks. I think he totally dodged a bullet. She's currently on her 3rd marriage. She might find it harder to get the next husbands to line up the more marriages she accrues. And yet again, we have evidence that cheaters are always real paranoid about their partners cheating. I don't imagine that's the last we'll see of it in this video. During rehearsal, my now husband and I didn't actually rehearse our ceremony, but just kind of talked logistics with our bridal party. As a result, when our ceremony was over, we didn't really know how to officially end it. So we just kind of stood there awkwardly for a few seconds until he whispered to me, "So, are you just gonna leave now?" Meaning that I was supposed to lead our exit. I, however, took it literally and just started walking. He claims that I ran away. I got about 10 to 15 feet away before he called out after me, "Wait, I think you're supposed to take me with you." It was very embarrassing, but apparently everyone found it hilarious and started laughing. Oh, I'll never live that down. My brother's friend got run over by a car at the church parking lot. He survived but was hospitalized for a week. The car that hit him was from the catering service. Ugh. Well, I haven't seen one from an arranged marriage setup, so here goes. I backed out a week before the wedding. We were engaged in February, and the wedding was to be 4 months later. He had to leave the South Asian country where I lived, so our interactions were strictly over the phone. I'm pretty sure I was a bit of a C-word in this situation. I talked to him very irregularly until the end of February, and then I just couldn't. Should have been a huge red flag to him that his fiancée hadn't talked in 3 months. I didn't have the courage to tell my folks, so I just waited to see if he'd back out, and, well, he didn't. And well, that's when I told him that I wouldn't be marrying him, after the invites had gone out and preparations were already in full swing. Ugh. I can't tell what exactly turned me off about him. I do know the fake American accent absolutely killed it for me. But the people I talked to about this tell me that isn't reason enough. Maybe arranged marriages is just not meant for some people. I definitely think it was for the best in the end. We were poles apart and it would have never worked, though I could have handled it better, I suppose. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I dated a guy for 5 years and things were going well enough. When we were both approaching 30, I really wanted to get married and start a family, but he felt he wasn't ready. Somehow his family talked him into proposing, and when he did, he said, "Well, I suppose we should get married next summer." That's it. When I later asked if he was going to get me a ring, he said, "Why? You already said yes." The whole planning process was like pulling teeth. He didn't want any part in it, and I was not only paying for pretty much everything, I was also choosing all of the vendors, decorations, and music. One night I sat at the kitchen table, addressing all of the wedding invitations by myself, and then he came in, picked one up and said, "Those look kind of cheap," and he walked out. I'd made them myself to save some money, and he had never even seen them before. I cried, finished up addressing the letters, mailed them the next morning, and then I left him a few days later because I felt that I deserved someone who was excited to get married to me. I'd been worried about how our friends and family would react, but really, everyone was totally understanding and sweet about it. My grandma just said, "Oh, these things happen." His uncle told me. I was engaged once, but then she ran away and became a nun. At least she left me for Jesus. Seriously, nobody gave me a hard time about it at all. Even the vendors were very supportive. As for my then fiancé, he was sad and cried, but ultimately, I think he was relieved that he didn't have to get married. All in all, he wasn't a bad guy. On the contrary, he was a total sweetheart, but the thought of settling down and taking on responsibility scared him to death somehow. Well, all this was 5 years ago. He's been single ever since, and I'm in the middle of planning a wedding again. This time, my fiancé is involved in every step of the process. He's talked to bakeries and seen more possible venues than I have. He tells me he can't wait to be my husband, and watching him practice his new signature does certain things to my heart. I've never regretted calling off the other wedding, because this is how getting married should be like. I think this just nearly happened to me. Or not, it's very confusing. My partner and I have been together 5 years. During this time, we talked about getting married, and actually he did something amazing one day which made me realize my search was over. So I jumped the starting pistol a bit and I asked him if he'd be up for marrying one day, and he said yes. Other times we've talked about it, he's always said it's on the cards. I don't want to nag the poor guy, but after 4 or 5 years, you do get to wondering. I never knew there was a problem. Well, there is a problem. It seems he doesn't remember any of these conversations. He doesn't believe in marriage, and he's never believed in marriage apparently, and I don't know. I just felt something go snap in my heart. So I love him, and I stay, but I cry every other night. I don't know why marriage is important to me, but it just is. It always has been. He's always known this about me too. I try not to let him know because it just causes arguments. Once when it got too much, I tried to leave, but he does this emotional blackmail thing where he says he's going to leave his very decent job and just go work in a war zone, and phones up his family, all sorts of crap. So I can't leave. I guess you can get jilted at the altar without actually being near one. Gaslighting and manipulation. Yeah, you should get out while you can. It may end up being me unless I can deal with some issues before that. You see, I just don't love my fiancé anymore. But he's told me on numerous occasions, including after cheating on me, that if I left him, he'd probably not be alive anymore. I can't deal with that kind of pressure and guilt, and I just don't know what I'm supposed to do about it. I don't have anywhere else to go or the means to support myself right now, so I just feel trapped. My sister was left at the altar by my best mate, and I was best man. He met my sister through me, and they went out with each other for 2 years and were engaged for a year before the big day. We're in the church, at the front, waiting for the bride with about 15 minutes left to go. He says he needs the toilet and walks to the back of the church. A minute or so later, it hits me that the toilets aren't at the back of the church, and I start worrying, so I go out looking for him. He's not in the toilets, not around the church, and nowhere to be found. My best mate had legged it. We didn't see or hear from him for 3 days, his family for 2 days, and by then he was just in Europe somewhere, staying with a friend. That's where he's been ever since for 3 years now. He's never made any effort to explain, even to my sister. Wow, top bloke. I need to go to the toilet must be the weakest excuse we've heard so far. And unlike the majority of these other situations, there was never any sequel to that statement or explanation to everyone else whose time and trust you wasted. Maybe self-imposed shameful exile is what he deserves until he treats other people better. I have a friend who went through with a wedding but left about 6 weeks later. She danced with her current husband at her first wedding more than her first husband. She implied once that I should have just talked her out of the wedding, but she was already legally married to the guy and would have probably lost a lot of money backing out of the big wedding at the last minute, so why not give it a shot? I wasn't aware of the extent of the issues they were having either. Also, why was it your responsibility to talk her out of it? Isn't she an adult who should be able to decide on her own if she wants to get married or not? I very much doubt this is a common occurrence. If I wasn't sure, I would back out way before getting the dress and all the expensive crap. However, I have a cousin who basically did it, sort of like 3 times even. The first time, guy number 1, everything was ready and they'd had the bridal shower and stuff, but she was talking to aunts and family members. Realized her guy was kind of into a lot of naughty movies and stuff and broke it off before the wedding. She kept all the presents. Second time, guy number 2, they got engaged, broke it off, don't really remember why at all. And third time, same as guy number 1. Absolutely no idea, because really I was just fed up at this point with even caring. At this point though, I realize I should have a lot more sympathy for her, because that seems to indicate actual problems that must be rather distressing for her. This woman who used to come and visit my parents when I was younger was left at the altar. She was one of those cases where you'll say karma got to her. This woman is a reason for so many divorces herself. She and her family members meddle in everyone's business. For example, if you have a fiancé, her and her cousins will make sure your fiancé dumps you by telling him about made-up lies. When she was left at the altar, it was an aha moment for everyone. You know, one of those come-to-Jesus moments. But she got married to another guy a year after that. Her cousin also tried to be a bride at another woman's wedding. Her cousin tried to be a what now? Can you elaborate on that? Unfortunately, there are no further answers. My dad actually jilted his fiancée. You see, my dad was fairly young and was arranged to marry someone that was supposed to be the most beautiful girl in the area. He worked on offshore rigs, so he didn't have any contact with the girl, with the exception of a few photos and a couple of long-distance phone calls, which were really expensive. When he got home, she came to visit and he realized that she was far heavier than what they'd shown in the pictures. When he pointed this out, nobody else seemed to think it was a big deal, but my dad was pretty unhappy. He went as far as talking to the girl and the girl's parents, asking them to respectfully call it off. But they were adamant about going through with the wedding. It was during that conversation that the family admitted that the girl was illiterate. She wasn't even interested in school, so they took her out early and sent her to study tailoring instead. She had not even learned how to handle money or read or write. My dad didn't want to embarrass the girl or her family, so he didn't tell anyone about what he'd learned. Everyone had assumed that she'd had a college-level education, but she actually went to a vocational school that was housed in the college building. A few nights before the wedding, my father's cousin, a friend, and his younger brother helped him escape. Another person volunteered to marry the girl, so she still got married on the day. So it all went about as well as it could have, I guess? I wasn't sure that I wanted to marry Sophie. I was confused. We went on vacation and I was initially planning on proposing to her. I'd bought a ring and everything. After much thought, I'd decided not to go through with the proposal, but while I was out of the hotel room, she found the ring. I didn't have the heart to explain that I'd changed my mind. After that, I just kind of went through the motions. On our wedding day, I ended up hiding in the upper gallery of the church with my best man and roommate, Jeremy. We just kind of hid up there while everyone looked for us until eventually he had to pee and we got discovered. Sophie was devastated and I think I'm just going to end up living with Jeremy forever now. This might just be how it's meant to be. Me and Jeremy living together until one of us dies or we just F each other. This happened to a previous work colleague. I'd been working with him as a cleaner for 4 years and he had been with his then partner for a while. Everything seemed hunky-dory and soon enough he proposed to her and she accepted. Everything seemed to be progressing smoothly and I even went to his stag do, which is to this day the most drunk I've ever been in my life. We had it at this farmhouse where the only rule was don't break anything, the house isn't mine. I ended up being the only person who did break something, and it was the entire stair banister. But I digress. As the wedding day approaches, I arrive at work to find out from my boss that the wedding has been called off. Apparently his fiancée was a lesbian and had been cheating on him for quite a while. What I never understood was how she could accept the proposal. Surely when he was down on one knee, that would have been the ideal time to express how you really feel. Similar but relevant, one of my exes asked me if I wanted to get married after about 3 weeks of knowing her. I spent the next month or so trying to figure out a good way to dump her because that set off my crazy alarm and I didn't want to break her. Abandoned or haunted? The creepiest, we're not alone, moments of urban explorers. My friends and I were exploring an abandoned restaurant in this beach town one winter night. We snuck in through a broken window on the shoreside to avoid being spotted by any cars driving by. Overall, inside it was your typical abandoned restaurant, but it was still really cool to check out. There was a long bar, tables tossed about, stuff like that. We walked downstairs into a wine cellar and started walking through the labyrinth of hallways. The basement was deceptively larger than we would have expected for a beachside restaurant. Anyway, we wandered into this room off one of the hallways and we shined our flashlight in the corner, and we see an unmade bed or cot with all of the trappings of someone currently living there. There was a safety razor next to the mirror, some random other belongings. To this day, we still don't know if the person was hiding in the basement with us, waiting for us to leave, or if we stumbled on it while they were out and about. Either way, we couldn't shake the feeling of being watched by someone from the shadows of that basement. I've only been brave enough to do urban exploration once. Well, twice I guess, but the same location both times. To elaborate, near an apartment I used to live in, there was an old hotel that was abandoned and boarded up. One night a friend was over and hanging out with me. We had a few drinks and then in a moment of inebriated bravado, a little tipsy but not fall-down drunk at all, we decided that exploring the old hotel would be a brilliant idea. The doors were on the outside, so it may have been a motel rather than a hotel. I'm not sure about the difference. The rooms were moldy, dirty, and broken down, but didn't have anything unexpected. There was some graffiti on the walls and some used prophylactics on the ground. Ew, in the rooms. Then we went into the office and lobby area. As we walked in, we froze. There, in the distance, in the darkened lobby, was a man staring at us. He didn't move, just stood there and stared us down. We bolted quickly and ran at a full sprint back to my apartment. Thankfully, the man, homeless or addict or whatever he was, we didn't know, he didn't follow us. A few days later, my friend was back and over during the day. We were talking about the experience with the hotel, and this time, spurred on by daylight, we decided to look in the hotel lobby again. When we entered, the man was still there, standing in the same spot, staring us down, and made of cardboard. We'd gotten freaked out by a cardboard cutout hawking the hotel's website and online bookings. As a man who's had the absolute bejesus scared out of him by a cardboard cutout that someone had placed in his work bathroom more than once, I feel your fear and humiliation. Nothing like that few seconds of terror between turning on the lights and realizing what the demon waiting for you in the dark actually is. I was on the other end of this. There was an abandoned nunnery on the coast behind a suburban development. Very creepy but beautiful place. I loved it because it had an entirely stone chapel. Any sound you made inside had true reverb. An echo a second long, almost. I brought a friend in to make some recordings in the dead of night. As we were leaving, a group of laughing neighborhood kids came in on us crouched in the dark over a bunch of electronics. They ran faster than I've seen anyone run before. Reminds me of something similar a friend and I experienced as well. We were going to explore a supposedly haunted slaughterhouse, which is in fact actually an old grain processing plant. It's about a mile's walk along a paved road. It was nighttime, but the moon was bright enough for us to see without needing lights. We could see 2 cell phone lights of people leaving the spot, walking towards us on the road. Friend and I didn't think too much of it and kept walking down the road. The 2 girls, as it turned out, had their phones mostly pointed on the ground as they walked. That meant they didn't see us until we were probably 10 or so feet away from them. 2 guys walking in the dark towards them in the middle of nowhere at a supposedly haunted location. They screamed bloody frickin' murder. We apologized and told them we're just going to check the place out too. Didn't even cross my mind how creepy that must have seemed to them until we'd already scared the crap out of them. Whoopsie! I guess I should be thankful that this is my creepiest story. So I was at an abandoned medical school in a pretty bad city with my friend. This friend told me homeless people squatted there, but only on the first floor. She even said one of her friends set their backpack down and had it stolen by one of them in plain sight. So we avoided it and explored the second floor. We kept hearing random noises like someone loosely following us, so we kept our guard up, but we never saw anything. We were then in this room and heard a louder noise and looked over to see a cat just chilling. It was the cat following us all along because after stopping to pet it and moving on, it continued following us, making the noises we kept hearing. It eventually came right up to us to be pet. We assumed it was a stray and wanted to get it help. So we agreed that if it followed us out, we'd take it to somewhere or to someone who'd care for it. It followed us outside and then immediately ran from us when we were like, well, guess we've got a cat now. So I went to see where it went, only to see one of the doors to the bando open, and this 6-foot+ dude walk out and yell at me, "Y'all screwing with my cat!" I just about crapped myself thinking I was about to be murdered or something. I was like, oh, is that your cat? He followed us out. And he's like, yeah, it's my cat. Colonel Mustard, get over here. And the cat actually comes running to him. He introduced himself and we talked for a bit. He was actually a really cool guy. Said he lived there and studied psychology and stuff to keep occupied. So there's a moderately well-known abandoned mental hospital close to my town. A few months back, a few friends and I went to explore a bit. Not a rare thing for people there. We found this setup of a few folding chairs and a couple of old mattresses with blankets and whatever else you'd imagine on them. We chilled there for about 10 minutes and then went on with our adventure upwards. Pretty uneventful from then on. There were a few really cool graffiti murals, an awesome view from the roof. When we were coming back through, we passed through the room and all of the chairs were folded up and neatly stacked against the wall, and the beds were made, or at least as close to that as it could have been. Whoever did it would most likely have known that we were there and waited for us to leave to do all of that, as it was only a time frame of about 45 minutes. No threats or anything, just an eerie feeling of being watched in an abandoned mental hospital. The area I'm currently in is a touristy beach place, so being winter it's completely devoid of life. There's a lot of apartments and hotels around that are just shells, no windows or doors. At 2 a.m. I went to go to the local garage to grab some smokes as we were running low. It was dead quiet and you could hear the teeniest, tiniest sounds. I was walking past one such building when I felt like I was being watched. I looked up and around, but I couldn't hear or see anything, so I carried on walking, but slower now, trying to be as quiet as possible while listening for anything strange. Then suddenly, every single dog around just went crazy barking. Like we're talking from dead silence to deafening barking in a second. It made me jump 10 feet. I looked up, and on the third floor of the apartment that had no windows or doors put in yet, was a single dog just staring at me. I literally turned around and walked straight back home and figured that I'd just go at a more reasonable time. I've lived in China for the last 18 years. At night, I'd get bored and go out riding my scooter and just explore various roads. This incident was about 14 years ago. There was a place I'd been to in the daytime, down a country road that was mostly green hills and forest. Somewhere, there was a little settlement where they were building a whole bunch of new things, including an apartment building that was at least 20 stories high. It was just a shell, no windows or doors or fittings yet, or even stairs, just the concrete for each floor and some walls. That night I rode past and stopped. There were bamboo ladders leading up to the first few floors and more bamboo ladders inside going all the way up the building. The entire building was filled with people, and they were families too. Mums, dads, cooking pots. They had little fires going and were cooking. Children and even babies. There were hundreds of people living in there, and as I stopped there with the engine running, more and more heads started appearing. People watching me. They were all silent, nobody called out. They just looked. So I rode off again and felt spooked. So I take a lot of time lapses of nature and stuff. One clear night I decided to drive out to the middle of nowhere to get a time lapse of the stars. I found a lake that seemed like a cool spot to shoot and set up. About 20 minutes in, I hear a noise and I look up to see a light above me. Sure enough, a drone is right above me, just hovering. It freaked me out, so I booked it out of there. I later learned that I was trespassing on government property. Haha, you're on a government database now. Somewhat hilariously, you were at least probably put up on a projector in some department's security review, so your face has gained low-level infamy in at least one tiny group of civil servants. Congratulations. There's an old flour mill on Harbor Island in Seattle. It's been abandoned and locked up for a while. My buddies went through a pretty serious urban explorer phase near the end of high school, so we were going to all sorts of weird and interesting places in the area just checking them out. Got chased out by cops a few times, the usual stuff. Anyways, inside this flour mill we were working through some of the regular block areas, and our buddy swears he hears something. We all stop dead in our tracks, lights pointed down. Just listening. The amount of noise a dilapidated building makes when you're trying to be quiet is amazing. Constant creaking and wind noises. Then I start to hear it. It was shuffling, with the sound of somebody dragging something across concrete. At this point, I can hear my heart jumping out of my chest, the blood pulsing in my ears and head, and I'm hyper-aware as I try and pinpoint this sound and associate it with something I knew. By the time we're sure it's not just the wind, we've all heard the noises. There were 5 of us in there. and we're starting to think it's coming from near the stairs. We slowly, achingly creep our way over broken glass and dirt. When we came up on the stairwell, we shined our lights down and up to the adjacent landings for the floor we were on, and we couldn't see anything. My buddy turns around and steps on an old water bottle on the ground, making the loudest crackling a water bottle has ever made in the history of recyclables. One of my other friends, looking back down the factory area we came through, gets startled and yells, "Fudge!" at the sound of the water bottle. We immediately heard the most chilling, deep scream. At that instant, we all just put the gas on and ran the F out of there. At the bottom of the stairwells, we ran into like 10 homeless people who weren't there before, but we paid them no mind and didn't stop our dead sprint until we got back to our cars. We figured it must have been some homeless person we'd scared with our creeping around and then the sudden expletive, but we never saw the person or identified the sound. So who knows? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I live in a big US West Coast city. In a neighborhood where most homes go right up to the sidewalk property line and have a yard in the back, my place is the opposite. The house is at the back of the lot, front yard keeps me buffered from the street noise. It's a nice, dark little oasis in the city. My house has a double door and split door, so the top can open independently of the bottom. I often leave the top open when the weather's nice. So I was sitting on the couch in the living room, all of 15 feet from the door. It's nighttime, I'm reading, and the door's more or less directly in front of me. The porch light's off, the yard's dark, the only light's from the dimmed reading lamp that I'm using. The wind keeps blowing the top part of the door open, closed, open, and closed. I'm used to it. It happens all the time. It doesn't sound out of place. Until the door kind of misses a beat. I don't hear it thud closed. I look up and it's perfectly still, only open 2 or 3 inches. It was one of those what the frick are my eyes seeing moments. There's like a 15-mile-per-hour wind outside. How is the top part of the door partially open and perfectly still? Then my eyes or brain recognizes it. The outline of a hoodie, drawstrings, hood up, and in that instant I'm frozen and my heart is pounding. Someone is literally standing right there, hood up, holding my door open. I can't see this face, but he sees me noticing because he says, "You should keep your doors locked." Mother frickin' what? Now my adrenaline kicks in, I jump up shouting and he bolts. I get the porch light on in time to see him running out the gate. I still wonder how long he'd been there standing or what the frick he was doing and thinking. That door has been very much frickin' locked since then. A rural experience. A graveyard behind my high school in the middle of the cornfields was a go-to driving around spot because we had nothing else to do as teenagers. Early on in the school year, a lady parked her car in the back of the cemetery and walked into the cornfield and ended her tenure on the planet with the aid of a bullet. The graveyard was super old and on a gravel side road, so nobody noticed for like a week. Kids who were running across country smelled something rancid and they reported it. Once it was investigated, the truth came out and it was weird. She wasn't even from my area. She drove around 2 hours and had no relation to anything around the area. No note was left, it was really bizarre. Anyways, we were driving around months later telling the story to some younger students, really trying to freak them out. But when we turned around the corner to pull into the graveyard, a random car was parked in the back of the yard. We slowly rolled up to it while all of us were losing our minds, only to see a woman sitting up from the back seat, undressed from the waist up, followed by a similarly au naturel man. Awkward, but that was the tightest my butt had been clinched up to that point of my life. I explored part of an old Nike or Atlas missile site one night with a few friends. As we were leaving, someone started shining a laser pointer at us from the woods. Somehow, we couldn't actually see where they were, even though that's usually pretty easy to do with laser pointers. I still wonder if it was just a laser pointer and not a laser sight instead. There was a decommissioned naval base in the town I grew up in. We used to sneak into the old barracks, and one time I turned the corner into the hallway and found a lit cigarette on the ground. There was nobody around from what I could see or hear. We noped the F out pretty shortly after that. I spent 2004 through 2009 living in a dilapidated warehouse that had a space over it converted into an apartment. In exploring the warehouse beneath it before moving in, a buddy of mine and I were discussing how the place smelled and was haunted. In making jokes about it, we started laughing when something shattered on the wall near us. We were seriously startled and contemplating what it could have been when someone shouts, "Shut the frick up!" And there's a homeless man throwing what I assume was a second bottle at us from across the space. In a non-threatening way, I calmly state, "Are you sure you should be in here?" And he waves something at me and yells at me to call the police if I don't like it. So there's this building in my city that's been abandoned for over a decade. The building itself covers over 40 acres, so it's pretty well known by explorers that if the cops come, they won't search for you inside, but they'll wait for you to come out. The second time I went to explore this place, we were looking for a way inside. Keep in mind this is taking place early in the morning, maybe 3 a.m. We come across this section of the building that was a large outdoor amphitheater. We walked down to the center and went up to the boarded windows, and ever so faintly on the other side of the wood you could hear someone talking to themselves. We got the F out of there. Yeah, you get this kind of early warning of how bad things are about to be later, early on in horror games before the lights go out. Like in Resident Evil Biohazard when you first step into the house and there's gruesome crap all over the place. That's the point where the real-life narrator would have just peaced out, just like the people in this story. No horrifying adventures for this guy. I decided to climb a tree with a friend in the middle of a large college campus at 2 a.m. Sat up there chatting for a while, then a car pulled up and parked nearly right below us. We went silent. One guy gets out, driver stays put with the engine running, 5 minutes passed. A whistle comes from behind a nearby building, and one is returned from the guy below us. A few minutes later, someone walks up. There's a short exchange, we can hear and see everything. The guy walks away and the car leaves. We're silent. 10 minutes pass. We hand-gestured and decided it was time to go. We dropped out of the tree and ran. Technically, those guys should have been the ones feeling not alone, but instead we did for weeks. We were so sure we had been spotted. When I was in high school, my girlfriend lived in Topanga Canyon, which is a pretty bizarre place filled with bizarre people. Well, one night I was leaving her house and I had to walk down the road to get to my car. Road in quotes because most of Topanga's houses are accessed by barely single-lane cracked tar roads with stumps and stuff coming up through them. It was like a 10-minute walk down from the hill to get to my car and get in. It was pitch black. I sat there for a moment and before I turned on my car, I heard a noise. Thinking it was an animal, I didn't move. How am I supposed to know if a bear or mountain lion can break into a 1990 Volvo 240 DL? I hear the noise pass by the car, but I don't see anything. Literally nothing. I freeze. After about 5 minutes, I decided that if it was something dangerous, it would have stopped, right? So I turned on the car. I switch on my headlights and drive the rest of the way down the hill. And that's when I saw them. As I turned onto a wider road, I see two people with black cloths draped over their entire bodies, no shoes, walking slowly down the road in the direction I'm driving. The cloths must have been velvet or similar, because they were pitch black even as my headlights passed across. I gunned it around them and turned onto the main road and watched in my rearview mirror as my tailgate's red colors faded on their forms. I then realized if I'd had left my girlfriend's place about 30 seconds later, I would have literally walked into two people wearing jet black, walking slowly in total darkness in the middle of the night in Topanga. I just got a shiver thinking about that. My friend and I explored an abandoned psych hospital in Suffolk County, Long Island. After checking out the building with the cafeteria and bowling alley, we decided to leave by exiting through the patient room window that we'd entered through. I realized I'd left my flashlight back in an adjacent patient room, so I told my friends that I'd quickly grab it. When I went to the other patient room to retrieve it, I noticed that the door was closed and a light flicker was occurring on the other side of it. I noped out of there so fast. This was back in summer 2012. Every morning my mum used to take me and my brother to our grandparents. While she went to work, my grandparents lived in a really isolated rural zone. Near my grandparents' house, there was a huge abandoned factory, and I'd always wanted to go see what was in there. So I begged my uncle, he lived at my grandparents' house, if we could explore that building. He said yes, so we went to the building and searched for an opening to get inside. Once inside, we started to look around the place, and obviously found nothing except old machines and stuff like that. When we were about to leave, we heard noises coming from upstairs, and then steps. We saw a shadow coming towards us, so we got the frick out of there running. A few days later, I was at my grandparents' house with all of my cousins. Suddenly, the neighbors rang our doorbell and told us that there was someone breaking into our back garden. My uncle went out to check while one of the cousins called 112, the local police number. Soon after the call, my uncle came back inside and told us he saw the guy that had broken in running towards the old abandoned building. I never discovered if the guy in the building and the other in the garden were the same person. It's a pretty messed up story. I was exploring an abandoned rehab near my house with two of my friends and it had just freshly snowed, literally while we were exploring. I was approaching one building there when I looked down and saw a very large set of obviously men's footprints in the snow leading to the building. We continued anyway. We always went prepared to defend ourselves because you never really know, right? And we opened the door. to a completely silent, empty building. There was a staircase to a tiny loft, and we went up, only to find that someone had cut a makeshift door in the wall and was presumably just hanging out in the attic. We opened that door too, and there was still nobody. We never saw anyone, but I haven't been back since. It creeped me out far too much. We'd finally worked up the courage to explore this super scary-looking dilapidated house. It was boarded up really solidly. Nobody was getting in or out without a ton of work prying off boards. We searched exhaustively. The easier way in was just to make the damaged drywall on the back wall a little more damaged to widen the hole, we thought. As soon as we stepped in, there was something vaguely human-shaped at the top of the stairs we both saw, and we bolted in terror. Of course, my friend and I were only 9 at the time. It was probably just some homeless dude better at finding entrances than us. As an adult now, I really want to go urban exploring in New York City subways, abandoned stations. But I need to meet someone familiar with all the new post-911 security crap because I'm paranoid about it. An even more exciting target is the abandoned 19th Street Path Station. The only even semi-modern footage is just blurs captured from passing trains, not any better than I can catch myself. But I think their security would be really tough. There's keypads at the front entrances, presumably to disengage some security thing. Shocking lessons from my childhood that I had to unlearn to actually survive. How to not make friends. It was always emphasized to me by my parents that my friends were meaningless and we should stick to ourselves and not talk to anyone else. Now it's hard to make friends and keep them, or even have meaningful relationships with other people. That you don't have to use your turn signal if there's no one behind you. Thanks, Mum. I got pulled over by a cop that was just sitting in his car on the side of the road and saw me do that. My mum doesn't use a turn signal for any reason at all. She even changes lanes without looking sometimes. So one time I bugged her about using the signal and she said she didn't want the other drivers to know where she was going. I too find my greatest advantage on the road is the element of surprise. My parents never wanted to listen to kids' music, so they'd change song lyrics and just sing them loudly over the songs that they were listening to when I was in the car. The most notable was the Jimmy Buffett song that goes, "Why don't we get drunk and screw?" which they changed to, "Why don't we get lunch at school?" I was frickin' 20 before I finally figured out Jimmy wasn't interested in eating hot lunch on a waterbed, and Eric Clapton wasn't actually singing about hanging out with a woman named Jolene. I still sing that song with my dad's silly lyrics, "She don't lie, she's got big furry thighs, Jolene," all the time. Update, my dad needed the internet to know the second verse of his child-friendly version of that song was, "Don't forget this fact, she's got a smelly butt crack, Jolene." Learned from my dad how to be non-confrontational because of his explosive anger. I've come to realize not everyone gets irrationally angry when you confront them, so I'm working on that. Both my parents would blow up at me when I opposed them. I don't think I realized before why I'm so non-confrontational. I'll be 41 years old this week. Thank you for this gift. Whatever happens, don't spend money. It was a frickin' breakthrough in therapy when I figured out that if I have a problem, I might be able to fix it by buying something I can afford. Then it's okay to buy things. That one's good to be taken with moderation, isn't it? I mean, yep, if it solves a problem and provides the best avenue, great. The problem is more when people buy things they don't need to solve something, or engage in mindless consumerism for a little dopamine hit on something that they won't use. But yeah, your folks might have done you a bit dirty there. My mother has a habit of talking about things like she's an expert. It wasn't until I hit my late teens that I realized she'd just make stuff up without having proven or factually read about anything. Also, she's really gullible when it comes to polite people in administration. I've learned to question everything. I built my own computer. I spent several weeks reading about them in my own time to learn how they work, because I'm genuinely interested in them and love to learn as much as I can. I've used them every day of my life, I've grown up around them, and I'm constantly explaining to Mom how things work. But sure, Mom, trust that one tech that came in 5 years ago who told you that Rosa's laptop was eating all the internet and left without doing anything. Default back to that explanation every single time it stops working. Yes, me turning off 3 of my monitors will speed it up for everybody, because you know how bandwidth works more than I do. I love my mum, but she wasn't and still isn't the most attentive housekeeper. I never really realized it until I was much older. I lived like a total slob for a long time. Then I met my ex, with whom I have a son. She was and is a frickin' cleanliness freak. It rubbed off though, because now I'm just as bad. I never realized how good having a very clean home is for your mental well-being. I've got the opposite problem. My mom is a total perfectionist when it comes to housework, and I had to train myself to think that it's okay to have some dust, some crumbs, and some clothes on the back of your chair. Having any kind of mess in my home made me feel anxious and a failure. I realized my mum kept the house the way she did because after she had met me, she never went back to work, and obsessive cleaning was how she directed her energy, or proved her worth. It wasn't healthy. It took decades to mostly denormalize emotional bullying and gaslighting. In my ignorance, I hurt many people I cared deeply for. I cry a lot realizing the people I hurt when I myself was hurting due to these things. We're better people by acknowledging it and trying to be better. If I was feeling down, then I'd better keep it to myself because nobody wanted to hear it. My parents always said it wasn't fair of me to be upset because other people had to live with it too. Cuts real deep when you're a sensitive person and always have been. I'm still trying to unlearn the unhealthy eating habits they taught me. I'm having to learn what a normal human portion size is. Eating 8 slices of homemade French toast slathered in butter and syrup is not a healthy life choice. My parents never told me to stop. To try to finish people's sentences. My mum would sometimes get lost or stuck in the middle of her sentence, so my sisters and I would finish the sentence for her, since we could usually guess what she was trying to say. But for most people, this would just be annoying. When I was a teenager and beginning to work real jobs, my parents told me to never take a pay rise if it put you in a higher tax bracket and wasn't a big enough difference to cover the increased tax rate. They didn't understand that when you move up a tax bracket, only the income in that bracket is taxed at the higher rate. They were convinced that if you moved up a tax bracket, then all of your income was taxed at the higher rate. I found a ton of people that actually think this. Not my parents, but my grandpa used to tell me that if I didn't step off an escalator quick enough, it would suck me under. I had an irrational fear of escalators for years. That if something breaks, that's it. You don't fix things in your house. Sink breaks? Brush teeth in the kitchen from now on. Especially never pay anyone to fix things. If you can reasonably fix things yourself, you should, but if you can't, hire someone. No sense in living with a bunch of jerry-rigged, half-fixed crap. My little sister was going to call the landlord because of her kitchen drawers being messed up. It took me 5 minutes with a screwdriver. I sincerely think most people lack the confidence to even try it. That or the clever little witch conned me into doing it as an excuse to feed me brownies. I love that woman. That it's normal to be a pack rat and have a messy house. I still get anxiety when getting rid of things I no longer use or clothes that no longer fit, but I've come a long way. Once my anxiety passes, I feel so relieved that I no longer have all this stuff I have to move around or find a spot for. I remember my aunt coming over back when I was a kid and sitting in the cleaned-up living room, just sort of looking at piles of things that I only realized were trash in retrospect. I remember she asked my mother, "Why do you keep all this stuff, like all of these old newspapers?" And she pointed to one of the many stacks of newspapers on the coffee table. And my mother grabbed one at random from the pile and flipped to a random page. "Because I haven't read them yet," she said. "See? Like this article. It could be important news." "Honey," my aunt said, "that newspaper is 7 years old. It doesn't matter if you read that article anymore." That you should always eat everything on your plate. This is something I still struggle with every day. It was so hard for me to learn that it's okay to have leftovers and that it's also okay for me to make less because I could always make more. When a boy is mean to you, it's because he likes you. So many girls I know, including myself, were taught this. It's incredibly damaging for both genders. There was a kid in my 3rd grade class that attacked me on 3 separate occasions. The final and worst one was when he pierced me in the stomach with a screwdriver on the playground. It didn't seriously injure me, but it was enough to break the skin. The school counselor seriously just sat me down and said that it's what boys do when they like girls. My dad pulled me out of school until the school expelled the kid. I don't know what was happening behind the scenes, but I do know that I was out for a good solid week. People less fortunate than us are not bad people. Actually, once I figured out that my old man was a hater, I did the opposite of what he did and my life worked out much better. Their whole idea was that if you weren't a doctor, engineer, or lawyer, then you were someone that lacked sophistication and weren't worthy of being respected. It was really shoved down our throats. Growing up in a religious South Asian family was such a frustrating experience. Oh God. If I was forced to only hang out with my friends of a certain income bracket, then honestly I think I'd lose most of my dearest ones, and the ones who are the most fun to hang out with. It's no wonder people who think like this tend to be so miserable. That nobody will help me when I need it, and that I'm not worth the resources, time, or love of other people. That everyone's jealous of me. My parents convinced me that I'd never get rejected romantically. Everyone wanted to be me, and that I was the smartest person in the room. I was proud of it for a little while until I failed my first test and had my first heartbreak. That I was hard to love. Casual racism and an F-ton of body image issues. That hamburgers were made from hamsters. The truth isn't much better, I guess. Cows are pretty cute. My parents taught me that it doesn't matter how you look on the outside, it matters who you are inside. Cue years of obesity and inattention to beauty standards. Turns out the first thing that people see when they meet you is your face, body, and your clothes. The difference in treatment when you're attractive versus unattractive is stunning. They taught me a sweet, kind ideal, but goddamn, the world isn't as heartfelt as they are. What's inside is more important, but giving yourself the best foot forward and having a good cover for judgmental people to, well, judge you on, isn't going to hurt in social situations. How to take care of any flowering plant. I love my mum, but my god, she cannot grow a frickin' plant to save her life. The only reason I can do it is the sheer power of WikiHow, YouTube, and books. She'll routinely hand over poor plants that she's almost killed for me to nurture back to health. My room now has more greenery than our lawn. That being on time is late. It sounds like a good skill, but when you get terrified and start shaking when you're a minute late to a movie, you realize you need to change that. When I was in therapy a few years back, one of my ongoing assignments was to be late for therapy. I was incredibly uncomfortable, but her rationale was to help drive home that I was important too, and sometimes things are out of our control, and that I wouldn't be judged for being on time or even 5 minutes late. I still struggle with it, but I don't have the extreme anxiety any longer when I am. Did you still have to pay for the full session? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? When people ask you how you're doing, it's because they're being polite, not because they really care. I had to learn that some people actually do ask because they really care. Learning to trust them. Just because they're your parents, it doesn't necessarily mean they're good people. My left-handed mother taught me, a righty, to use a can opener. It took me till I was 40 to figure out how to easily open a can. That people bullied me because they were jealous. No, they bullied me because they were absolutely insufferable C-words. That everyone was always watching me, judging me by my clothes, actions, and that my character was the sum of my mistakes. Now at 48, she's still embarrassed that I have the fashion sense of a 12-year-old boy and don't wear makeup. What would the neighbors think? Oh god, where to start? That buying the cheapest thing in the least quantity for the lowest price right this moment is always the best strategy. That the Bible is 100% literal truth and completely without error or contradiction. That the gays got acquired immunodeficiency syndrome as a direct punishment from God, and that the high rate of depression is because they separated themselves from him. That trans people are even worse than the gays, and that I personally was going to go to hell for eternity after suffering a life of horrible depression and dying early of transmitted diseases or by my own hand, which would be my own fault. And of course that the earth is 6,000 years old, tops. And so on and so forth. Mama always said that the alligators got so ornery since they all got teeth but no toothbrushes. My parents are some of the most judgy people I've ever met, especially about people's looks. I'm always hearing them say crap like, "That is not a pretty woman," or with disgust, "Is that a man or a woman?" about strangers just about every time I hang out with them. It makes me mad, honestly. I've been careful not to pick that up from them. Yep, I call my mom on her heavy judgment of others frequently now. She's starting to backpedal and catches herself doing it before I can say anything these days. Progress. That you have to have constant social interactions or stimuli. I've never listened to that. I've always decided I'll be social when my brain decides to. Religion. My family is hardcore Roman Catholic. When I was younger, grade school to high school, my aunt would drag me to processions. We'd walk for miles holding candles while singing chants. I thought that was normal. She wanted us to follow what the church would tell us to do. When I left home for college and did my own study about religions, I became agnostic and realized everything we did was weird. I still don't have the nerve to tell them my religious views. They would flip out. That you should always anticipate the absolute worst. Friend late for meeting you? They're probably dead. I'm currently working to unlearn this in therapy. How to apologize. My dad never apologized for anything, even if he was wrong, and he'd expect you to be okay with him after. Medical bills won't report to your credit. Yes, the frick they will, Leslie. My parents were somewhat opposite to that when it came to debt and bills. I was taught that a single missed payment would wreak havoc on your credit, and that bankruptcy had lifelong consequences. Someone being angry with me wasn't going to end in a beatdown. Though I'll still shut down entirely when my boss yells at me, for example. This is still a struggle, actually. When I got reprimanded for saying the F word at my first job, I literally cried through the whole thing uncontrollably because I'd been so conditioned to expect a lot of pain and rage. Fast forward almost 7 years and I still tear up when my boss gets onto me. It's infuriating because no matter how calm I am, it happens. That if girls play hard to get, they like you, or some stupid crap like that. Oh boy, if you combine that one with the boys are mean to you because they like you angle, then you have just about the possible worst dating scene I've ever heard of. No means no, folks, and being a jerk to someone happens to mean you're being a jerk to them. After my upbringing, I had to learn to be diplomatic rather than confrontational in situations where I feel wronged. Directing biting, hostile comments and insults at your family every day. Catastrophizing when everyday inconveniences occur, defeatism and taking everything as a cosmic sign of your bad luck. Like if you spill milk on the kitchen counter and floor, I can just never get ahead in life. That was an actual recent quote, by the way. Ruminating over old minor slights endlessly for years. Do you remember the time your grandma said, insert fairly neutral comment here, "No, Mum, I gave her the benefit of the doubt that she didn't mean anything by it, and also that happened literally 20 years ago." That vaccines don't work or make you sick or weak or dead. Hey, you can't have autism if you die from polio. Not everyone is out to get you. Life isn't about being paranoid. My dad had some deep-seated problems with this. Any look or comment could be a slight. He recently left the church our family had been going to for 12 years and was actively involved in because he thought the sermon was ridiculing him directly. But the kicker, the new church's sermons were also about him specifically, even though no one out there knew him or his situation. If you need to know something, they'll teach it in school. Don't screw up something by trying to fix it yourself, always call a professional. You have the problems, we don't have the problems, everyone else in this family is normal. Actual words from my dad's mouth, don't cheat, unless you know you can get away with it. I mean, that's fine for board games, but not in relationships. That being open about your feelings isn't that important because no one wants to hear it. Also, that you should put up with alcoholics or other addictions for years. It's just easier that way. You should respond with anger to anything going wrong. That cleaning the house every day is necessary in any way, shape, or form. My mom made me obsessed with this when I was a little kid, with sweeping and vacuuming all the time, and she made me feel bad growing up in my preteen years for not cleaning every day. Now it's pretty clear she has some kind of OCD, and I'm glad I stopped caring. You don't need good credit, save up and pay cash. Not always true. If you're smart, credit can work for you. To live life on the fly. Treat every day like it's your last. It's a really crappy, selfish way to live, actually. If everyone treated each day like their last, it would be utter chaos. If I knew I'd die tomorrow, then I'd gamble my life savings and other stupid crap that would get me consequences. Not necessarily. I've often heard the advice to treat each day as it's your last means to appreciate life and not take it for granted. Yes, this can be applied in crappy or selfish ways, but I surmise that the people that would do that are crappy or selfish anyway, regardless of if they treated each day as if it were their last. It took me quite a while to break the habit of my mum's poor grammar when speaking. I never knew I was doing it wrong until I got older. Obsession over whether household chores are done exactly the right way. Oh, you know, a whole bunch of stuff about what a burden I was. They also convinced me that I was an ungrateful person who couldn't feel gratitude, and I believed that until probably my mid-20s. That I'm really smart, that I wouldn't be able to relate to normal people, and I'd have a hard time making friends because I'm so far above them. That being smart was the only thing that mattered, and that my sister was somehow lesser than me because she's a social butterfly, but not super bright. That things like attractiveness and social grace were superfluous and only used by people who weren't smart enough to not need them. I placed far too much value on intellect and not nearly enough on kindness, humility, empathy, for far too much of my life. I'm 28 now and I'm still unlearning a lot of that bullcrap. It sucks. Leaving that safe zone of, I'm smart, so I'm fine, is hard because you have to take a long look at all the other areas where you're lacking. But it's necessary. Once you finish school, nobody gives a crap how smart you are. Be a good person. Making the world a better place is so much more important than stoking your own ego. Clean your plate. It's a good idea for the children of parents who lived through the Depression. Not a great idea today. I'm making a conscious effort to leave food on my plate now. To keep things too clean and too organized. Turns out my idea of embarrassing mess people will hate you for is other people's so clean that it's creepy. My grandparents tried teaching me to not question authority, but instead ended up teaching me to keep my mouth shut or pick my battles. Ironically, my dad, who couldn't raise me because he was always working, taught me that all authority should be questioned, even if it's just a little. I am currently unlearning the eat everything on your plate mentality, as well as the eat half a family-sized bag of Doritos in one sitting mentality. Addictive behavior and mindset. Still haven't unlearned it, but I'm working on it. Tell the teacher, tell the authorities, they'll help you, just don't fight. That was my mother's opinion on how to react to the 7th time I got beaten up for being the only brown kid in class that didn't have an accent they could laugh at. Oh no biggie, that I'm a horrible person and that everything that goes wrong is my fault. Jealousy is a virtue. My mum would always be possessive of my dad and make jokes about kicking the butt of other women who might be sniffing around him. It was almost like something to be proud of, an expression of love. It wasn't until much later in life that I realized jealousy and control isn't an expression of love, and that it can actually be really damaging and hurtful, not to mention it makes you look crazy. That Democrats are unreasonable, crazy people that want to take all of your money, and that people of color are out to get white people. It took me far too long to come out of it. They said they loved me, and then burned it all down on the way out. Spiteful ex stories. During my friend's divorce, the ex took him to court for everything she could get, including his dog that he'd had since he was 15. She was able to get the judge to give her custody of his dog Alice. A week or so later, a box was mailed to his parents' house with his name on it. When he opened it, it was full of ashes. The witch had the dog put to sleep at a vet, cremated, put the ashes in a box, and mailed it to him. My ex filed a bogus restraining order not allowing me to see my son, who I was taking care of while she was at work. She filed that I was going to end him and her and then take him overseas? The court accepted the order. 6 months later, she called me saying, "You need to start watching the baby again." So I start watching my son again, and then I ask her if my son could spend at least one night a week with me. You see, I was retired from the police force due to an on-the-job injury, so I had the benefit of spending time with my son. She flat out refused. Long story short, after all the false allegations she'd started about me, false kidnapping reports, and having the police knock down my door and my son and I in shock, years of court proceedings, and even though the courts and social worker found her to be a scorned woman and a rampant liar, they awarded her full custody. It's been 5 years, 6 months, 7 days and 16 hours, 4 minutes and counting since I last saw or spoke with him. I cannot see my son, who I still pay $400 a month in child support to, and he only lives 10 minutes away from me. Attempted self-deletion, or at least they claimed to, multiple times purely to get my attention. The first time it happened, I just called an ambulance, only to have the police call me back 20 minutes later saying she was clearly making the whole thing up. She also regularly threatened to crash her car with both of us in it and to kill my family. Once tried to shank me with a kitchen knife. Once we broke up, she told all of our mutual friends that I was a bullying, cheating monster, neither of which is even remotely true. By the time I realized what she was doing, most of them were already refusing to talk to me. Of that entire group, she manipulated all but 2 or 3 into hating my guts. My ex-wife started doing the deed with my best friend of 14 years as soon as we separated. But I allow the possibility that it happened before that. Not only did she crush my soul, but took my best friend who I looked up to. He was also married. I hear they had a baby now and he's still married. Whatever. I hope they both die a horrible shark-related death. Yeah, I don't know how you can be best friends with someone for that long, hear about potentially them making each other miserable during the divorce, and then decide that your best course of action should be to throw another spanner into the works. And judging by the fact that he was already married, he just seems like a quality bloke all round, doesn't he? My ex-girlfriend and I shared a bank account after living together for 2 years. I know, the groundwork for a happy ending, right? Well, she was saying she had a job when she didn't and was lying about money while I was working every day. So I broke it off with her and moved out and went to the bank to close our account. I was told both parties had to be there to close the account, but she wasn't coming around for a while. So I just took my name off the account and opened my new one. Bank of America wouldn't screw me, right? Well, fast forward 3 months later and I had a few grand saved up and I was doing well. She wanted to get back with me even though she now had a boyfriend. I had no interest in that. Well, I went out to get some Gatorade before Ultimate Frisbee and none of my cards are working. I call Bank of America and they tell me that there's fraudulent activity. Yep, my ex had written $40,000 in fraudulent checks from our old account. The bank saw that I used to be on that account and drained it completely to cover the $40,000. I'm not a guy that has credit cards, so this was my only source of money, period. I was flat broke, and it sucked. I took her to court, but she doesn't work, so I hope one day to get a few dollars of that back. My ex wrote $40K in fraudulent checks from an account we used to have together, and the bank took all of my money too. My ex set everything I'd left at the house on fire. She bragged about it over the phone later. Even your Game Boy Advance. Wait, my Game Boy Advance? Yes. Which, my Game Boy Advance is sitting right next to me. You set your Game Boy Advance on fire. Around 8 years ago, while still dating her, she tricked me into getting her pregnant. She sabotaged the birth control, and as soon as she got pregnant, cut all contact. I tried to remain civil with her, and I have been up to this day, but she quite clearly told me the only reason she started dating me in the first place is because she wanted a child, and I'd never factored into her plans. When my daughter was born, she didn't put me on the birth certificate and put the father as unknown. I took her to court multiple times, but she denied paternity was mine, and the courts apparently couldn't force a DNA test. She eventually moved and completely disappeared off the radar. I have an 8-year-old daughter out there somewhere who I've only seen once. I think about her every day. I was falsely accused of domestic attacks and had every journal and photo of my childhood taken from me. Also, every piece of physical belongings that I'd had at the time. It all came out in the wash on the violence thing. The judge started to see it was all a hoax, but damn, it was the most trying 6 months of my life. Me and the lady split a few months ago. Out of nowhere, I got a random text from her, which happened to be a picture of her hand grasping a male organ of impressive stature. She began to explain how thankful she was I broke up with her so she could find such an implement. I wanted to be mad, but I couldn't. I just kind of stared at the picture while thinking, good for her. That doesn't sound like she was over you. Agreed. He should have responded with, glad to know you still think about me whenever you do the deed. My buddy's ex cheated on him with our roommate, then turned into a super vindictive witch when he found out. The day she moved out, she filed a restraining order against him, claiming that he was prone to violent outbursts and, quote, a danger to himself and others. One of the most level-headed guys I know, who got cheated on with one of his best friends, and then, with her shiny new restraining order, she weaseled her way onto the volunteer staff at the anime convention he attended each year. She got in a week before, and got his admission revoked, and he couldn't get a court date fast enough to call her on her bullcrap before the con. Once he did get one, the judge basically told her to get the F out with that, because my friend brought a whole crapstorm of evidence with him. One of my sister's exes did a horrible thing in a very psychotic fashion. She found a wet shopping bag on her doorstep containing her drowned cat. My ex is a physician and addict, so she can manipulate with the best of them. When we decided to split, it was quite clear who was in the wrong, and we agreed that the debt she'd accumulated through her multiple tours in rehab, well north of $100K, should stay with her. We didn't have any children or any joint property to cause any fits over, so the divorce seemed pretty straightforward. She got a lawyer to help push it through, and I was going to try not to get one of my own to save costs. I know, obvious mistake. I was supposed to go to her attorney's office to sign some paperwork, but I was having trouble reaching someone at the office to make a time to stop by. Her lawyer emailed her that day saying that he hadn't heard from me yet, and she forwarded this email to me without realizing that she was forwarding me the entire email chain that she had had with her counsel. Whoops! In the email, she very clearly stated that she wanted to slap me with the rehab debt, stating that I was complicit in her substance use, which is all totally false. Needless to say, I went pretty crazy and immediately hired the most cutthroat lawyer I could find in my area. That guy was awesome and cheap, and he routinely put her in her proper place. This wasn't spite directed at me, but it was pretty narcissistic and ridiculous. My ex broke up with me and took our jointly owned car to another state. Proceeded to lose a series of jobs and fail to help pay any of our joint debt. The agreement had been that he'd pay it all, as I was a poor grad student and he was supposedly walking into a 6-figure salary. I had to track down his mum to get my name off his car loan, as he wouldn't answer my emails about it. I had to pay the remaining joint debt off myself slowly to preserve my credit. It was like $16K. Then he had the gall to come to Reddit and post an Ask Me Anything about how he purposefully left his high-paying job to follow his dream and become a penniless writer, despite Reddit pretty much immediately calling him out for receiving unemployment benefits, which you don't get if you leave your job. He brought up our relationship in the Ask Me Anything thing, and mentioned how he had paid all of our joint debt himself when he left since he could afford it and I was just a student. After all the time and saving it took me to get rid of that debt myself, that was a pretty crappy thing to read. Pretty much the whole AMA was very self-congratulatory like that. A lot of people bought into it and stroked his ego, and it made me realize just how fraught with single-sided bullcrap that subreddit might be. I had an ex spread a rumor around my small hometown that I'd physically bullied her throughout our relationship. I couldn't figure it out at first, but all of my platonic girlfriends suddenly started hating and avoiding me when I'd visit. When I called her out on it at a party, she just started laughing and said, "Oh yeah, I was just mad at you and told people that. Isn't that funny?" All I could do was shake my head and say, "No, witch, that's not funny at all." I still have to correct people to this day, 2.5 years later. Oh my god, you see that's not even remotely funny as a joke. And women like this using lies of physical battery to punish people can really hurt the credulity of women who need to report actual awful spouses to the law. You should always believe women, but not everyone agrees with that, and this ex would be one of the cases they point to as an example of why maybe you shouldn't. I got effed by both my ex and my $5,000 divorce lawyer. We got an agreement that she didn't want anything from me except $1,000 a month in child support, and that's after I came home from work a couple of months earlier to find nothing but an old chair in my house. She had the movers come in and take everything while I was at work. I said, "Okay," and we left it at that, waiting for the court date where her lawyer was supposed to bring our agreement to the judge. Anyway, I show up in court with my lawyer, we go in front of the judge, and her lawyer goes, "We want child support, alimony, and we want the husband to pay for the remainder of the car loan, 3 years, on my wife's car, and then transfer the car to the wife's name, and we also want the husband to pay for my services because he was the one who filed for divorce, which forced the wife to borrow $5,000 from her parents to pay for my services." The judge goes, "Sounds good, we're done." Meanwhile, my lawyer didn't open his mouth or look up from whatever the frick he was reading during the entire court session. And this fudgewit had the audacity to send me a card later, congratulating me on the positive outcome of my divorce case. So for the next year, I paid 75% of what I made, automatically taken out of my paycheck after tax, leaving me with nothing. Sold my car, moved out of my apartment, and couch surfed for a while. The day the ex received her last alimony check, we were only married for 2 years, so I paid alimony for half of that, she married my ex-best friend, which was why I filed for divorce in the first place. Took me 5 more years to pay off her car and her lawyer, so now I only have 7 years of child support left, even though the kid spends 5 days a week with me. And she is currently on husband number 4. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Well, mine gave me warts downstairs after she cheated on me with just a friend. Quality lady. Well, here's one of the worst I've witnessed. I started dating a girl just out of high school. Her ex-boyfriend was a violent, awful human being. When he found out that we were dating, he tried to befriend me. I was unaware of his habits until he tried to beat me up one day. That didn't work out too well on his end, so the next attack was to call the cops and my parents and report that I was selling green herb. That didn't work out either, and no substances were found. He'd found out that I smoked in the week where we were friends. His final FU was putting her brother in the car with him and driving off a bridge. He ended things for both himself and her brother. We found out later he'd been befriending her brother too, so there was no real suspicion when they got in the car together. Insane? Maybe. Frickin' evil? Absolutely. Manipulative and evil to the core. She hasn't been the same since. We still live in the same town, and I see her occasionally. 3 years after I broke up with my ex, she found out who my new girlfriend was, somehow got her phone number and bought up a disposable phone and texted the new girlfriend that I was cheating on her. She used a different name and used her previous knowledge of a birthmark location and what I like to do in bed to effectively throw my new girlfriend into a rage, and she didn't believe me due to the contents of the message. Forever alone. My first serious live-in girlfriend cheated on me with several of her past partners. I could never catch her doing it, but for a variety of reasons, I did know. I was nuts about her though, and she lied like a politician. Finally, my best friend's older brother nailed her, on purpose to prove it. Yeah, thanks for that, I guess. So I picked up my crap and left, peacefully. But I'd forgotten to grab my art portfolio from behind the couch. I called her that afternoon and said I'd be right down to get it. As I pulled into the driveway, she dropped the lit match onto the gasoline-soaked pile of my entire life's collection of artwork. I never did another piece of artwork again. F that C word. Right after high school, there was a girl who liked me, but the feeling wasn't mutual. She decided to cope with my rejection using the means at her disposal. She was an assistant manager at a video rental chain. I'd stopped renting there, but my rental account was still open. She started checking out movies under my name that I'd never actually borrowed. They'd never get returned, so massive late fees plus replacement fees showed up on my account. She also changed my mailing address in their system so that I'd never receive the notices in the mail. It wasn't until close to a year later that I started getting phone calls from debt collection agencies. It took years to get them to stop, and it negatively impacted my credit because I had no proof that the debts weren't valid, whereas the video chain had computer records of the rentals. I dated a hot and crazy girl in high school. I thought that I'd be super cool and take her out to my parents' lake house. After we broke up a few weeks later, she and her boyfriend, who she'd dated before, during, and after we were dating, rented a U-Haul van and cleaned out the house of all the furniture. She even stole my 8-year-old little sister's bunk bed. The only thing left was a fridge because they couldn't get it through the door. Dad found the house trashed and he was furious. We didn't find this out until a couple of years later when her boyfriend effed up and got caught. He admitted to stealing our stuff since the cops were able to match the serial numbers on the washer and dryer. I knew something was up when she called me up around Thanksgiving before we got the news about her boyfriend and said that she really loved me and really missed me. Stupid me, I thought this girl was coming around and we'd get back together and life would be great. 2 weeks later, I was giving my report to a detective and she's now currently in jail. In hindsight, insurance paid us for all of the stuff stolen, which was worth more than the current condition the stuff was in. The cops said that all of our stuff was messed up beyond repair. She's still currently in jail, by the way, and I am now married to the most beautiful woman in the world, and she's my best friend with a baby on the way. Well, not me, but my mother-in-law. She was married for a couple of months and got pregnant. Her husband told her to get it terminated. Being in a small town, she had to drive several hours to the nearest clinic. She waited outside for an hour or two and just couldn't go through with it. So she calls him to tell him she can't do it, and he hangs up on her. After a long drive home, she comes home to an empty home. Everything, including the ice trays in the fridge, are gone. The only things left are a rocking chair and some of her clothes. He took some of them. He never showed back up. As an add-on, she had the baby girl. That girl grew up and I married her. We got the chair for our kids. It's a nice chair. Huh. Sounds like although there was likely financial hardship on the road to where everyone in the story is today, it kinda went the best way it could for this lady. Got rid of a brutally callous man who didn't have the same aims as her, has a presumably loving daughter and grandkids as well. Win-win, I think. Hope the guy learned to be a human eventually. She took my adding machine. That thing was an antique too. I never got it back. That calculating witch. I dated this guy for about 3 months, from December 2008 through February 2009, and then I broke it off because he was trying to control me and I wasn't going to go through that again. Before we broke up, he was living with me and subletting his apartment. Well, once we broke up, I wanted him gone. Unbeknownst to me, he had gotten himself a residency permit, which meant I couldn't legally kick him out. I spent 9 months fighting this. In the meantime, he'd slap himself in the face until it was bright red, and then call the cops and say I was attacking him. I'd get arrested and then let out the next day when he decided not to press charges. He did this about once a month. The apartment was in my name, so I couldn't just leave it without penalty, so I was essentially stuck. He had manipulated the police department into believing him, so nothing I tried to get him to leave worked. Finally, in December of 2009, I'd met a new guy. And, well, the ex decided that if he couldn't have me, no one could. He deadbolted my bedroom while I was sleeping, so I couldn't get out, and he told everyone I knew that I had herpes and had a history of getting knocked up and then getting rid of the children, which essentially ended my new relationship. I just couldn't take it anymore. I called my dad, had him come pick me up, I lived 1,300 miles from home, broke my lease and got the F out of there. In short, my ex manipulated the cops into thinking that I beat him, had me arrested a few times, locked me in my room, and ruined my new relationship. Today I learned all of my past relationships have been sane and nobody on the internet understands what theft or destruction of property is. My ex wrote a poem about my member being small. It was like 10 verses long, and it was actually a very good poem. She sent it to all of my friends, but not to me. I found out 5 years later that she'd done this. My friend showed it to me. She'd sent it via MSN and email to everyone, and I was like, damn, she owned me. Luckily though, I did the deed with her sister a year prior to discovering the poem. Not even to spite my first girlfriend or anything, her sister just really liked me. So I guess we're even? I don't know. And anyway, it's not that small. It's fine. She accused me of the R word. She said that every time we'd done the deed in our 5-year relationship, it was the unspeakable act, and that I hit her regularly. Despite absolutely no evidence, the police had to pursue it as they're bound to investigate every accusation of that kind. No evidence, and the case was dropped. When my ex and I were going through a divorce, he decided to share with me that a year and a half prior, he had in fact taken my dog, who was 14 and I'd had her since she was 6 weeks old, to work with him, dropping her off in the middle of nowhere on the way. The dog was afraid of him, but he lured her into his truck with the words that every dog loves, "Bye-bye." He even left the gate open to make it look like she got out on her own. I searched for that damn dog for months. And during that time, he had sat back and watched me cry, put up posters, gone to every animal shelter around me. I hate that monster. Not only for that reason, he's also a religious weirdo. I worked night desk at my dorm. My ex brought guys home and had me sign them in. Then, before my shift was over, she walked the guy out with her hair all messed up and in her super short shorts and singlet. I look back now and laugh. Okay. Oh, nothing too out of the ordinary. I came home one evening and found a note that she didn't love me anymore. She had moved in with her parents and would appreciate it if I could be gone during the upcoming weekend so she could collect her stuff. Stunned and stupid as I was, I complied, came back home Sunday evening to find the place completely empty. She took everything except one thing, a 22-volume Britannica that she had bought the month before, despite my protests, and she had only paid the first installment for it. When I asked for explanation, she told me that since I had a job and a salary, and she was a student, I'd simply be able to replace all the furniture and pay off the encyclopedia. First thing I did, the books, bought in her name, were sold and I spent the money on a trip to Paris. Which? From normal to nightmare in 10 seconds. The unexplainable event that still haunts me. I'm curious if anyone else has had this happen. Years ago, my then wife and I would run into the same woman everywhere we went. And I mean everywhere we went. This went on for about a year. Go to the grocery store? She'd be there shopping. Starbucks? Yep, sitting right behind us. Walking around the mall? She'd pass us walking in the other direction. Movie theater? She'd be behind us in line getting popcorn. The creepiest encounter was while driving on the freeway. My wife looked at the car next to us and just screamed. Yep, it was her. She was always alone. She never talked to us and always made eye contact. She had a very unique appearance. She was very tall, very thin, and had very tight skin on her face. It was so unusual that we joked that we were being studied by an alien. It was some serious glitch in the matrix stuff. My cat hated me for the first 7 years we had him. He was a feral that was tamed by my wife and only accepted affection from her. My wife assured me that this was actually common for ferals. Then one day he suddenly just warmed up to me and wanted me to pet him. We've been best friends ever since. This was approximately 4 years ago, about the time my wife's brain cancer was becoming aggressive. Even before we were aware of it, she died 2 years ago. It's like he knew it was just going to be the two of us one day. It was years ago when I was about 17. I'd gotten home from school and I wasn't feeling well, so I spent the rest of the day just laying on the couch. By about 8 p.m. I was feeling even worse, and I decided I should just try to sleep off whatever it was, so I went to my room and got in bed and passed out pretty quickly. I don't know how long I was asleep, but I suddenly woke up in my pitch-black bedroom, and all I could think was, I'm going to die right now. My body was so weak and the room was spinning and my body felt like it was on fire. I looked over to the edge of my bed, and sitting on the edge was my grandmother, who had died just a few months before. She pats my arm and says, "It's going to be okay. Just call for your dad. Try it. Call for your dad." So I started calling for him, and it felt like an eternity, but he finally burst through my door and asks what's wrong. I look over and my grandmother is gone. After that, he gets me up and takes me to the ER where I have a fever of 106 degrees Fahrenheit, which explains a lot. I had to get a ton of fluids and a shot in my hip, but eventually I felt okay-ish. Her being there felt so real. It was so weird. I knew logically she wasn't, but it felt just so tangible. That sort of messed with me a little. I loved her dearly, and her death was very sudden. We kept her ashes in a nice urn in the house under a painting she'd done herself. When I got home and passed by, I said thanks to her. I know it was the fever melting my brain and maybe some sleep paralysis, but it still made me question the whole afterlife and those sort of things. You could definitely write this off as a fever manifesting with an overt sign from your brain that all wasn't right, but I don't think that makes this any less special, to be honest. If you don't want to go the supernatural route, you can interpret this as your mind choosing a beloved figure to impart this message on you. In a way, it's just as beautiful. Well, about 7 years ago, I was at my mum's house. I lived next door, and this white car pulled into the driveway. We weren't expecting anyone, so I assumed they were lost and needed directions and went to the door. A white woman in her 50s or 60s got out, along with a 9 or 10-year-old black girl. Surprised me because I expected the kid to stay in the car if they just needed directions. I opened the door and the woman kind of nudges the girl towards me, both with big smiles on their faces. I said, "Hi, what can I help you with?" She asked if I was Rebecca, and I said yes. She told me they went to a neighbor's house looking for me, and they pointed her to our house. They just kind of stared at me expectantly, like I was supposed to know the girl and be happy to see her. When I didn't react, the woman told me they were here to see the dentist. No dentists here. Small ranch-style house in a fairly rural neighborhood. No dentists here. Not anywhere near us, in fact. The woman and the girl just kept on smiling. They didn't look confused. They just kept saying, "Are you sure?" Finally, they left, and later I asked the neighbor who had directed them to our house, and she said she never told the woman my name and that the woman asked for me specifically. It's always kind of haunted me. I really feel like I was supposed to know that girl. Like, if I was a guy, this would be someone trying to introduce me to a kid I didn't know I had. I honestly started wondering if I was nuts and I'd given up a child for adoption or something. It was that strange of a feeling. My mum firmly believes the girl will come back someday to tell me what it was about, and I think about it frequently. It drives me insane to wonder what they really wanted. When I was 12 or so and still living at my parents' house, I woke up in the middle of the night to pee. I got to the bathroom and I heard what sounded like a party going on downstairs. Laughter, music, the sound of glasses being knocked together for a toast, the whole shebang. I thought it was weird that my parents had friends over so late and they hadn't told me, but I decided to go and see who was there. I opened the door to the kitchen and the entire downstairs was completely dark and silent. Not even a TV on. I was thoroughly confused, but the strangeness of the situation didn't really register, so I never told anyone. Years and years later, I'd mentioned this to my dad and he said he'd heard them too. Turns out there used to be a small public bar in their home, which is over 150 years old. I guess some of the patrons decided to hang out for eternity. Not me, but my grandfather. My grandfather had been in World War II and told us about when himself and a few other soldiers had been separated from his unit and were trying to get to Normandy. They'd gone through a clearing in a wooded area, but had to drop when they heard something approaching. They were on their bellies in low grass when they saw 20 or 30 German soldiers running across the clearing, clearly in a state of panic, and then they all just froze in mid-step. He said they resembled statues and that some weren't even touching the ground, and that there was no noise whatsoever. Even the birds had fallen silent. After a few seconds came a loud noise like metal scraping on concrete, and the frozen soldiers started to become blurry to the point at which they vanished without a trace. This had been reported by all of the soldiers who were present, and all were called to the War Office in London after their return to the UK, where they were pressed on what they saw over the period of a few days and were taken back to the same spot in France shortly after the war ended. Surprisingly, when they got there were other men sharing the same accommodation who reported similar occurrences in the exact same area. They were all taken to the woods and had to describe where and how the events took place. My granddad said the entire area was guarded heavily and that part of the ground was heavily excavated. The strangest thing of all, he said, was that there were hundreds of dogs in the area just milling around for no apparent reason. They returned to the UK with a gag order ordering them to never speak about any of this. He actually went back to the same spot in France before he died in 1985 and said that the area had been covered with unmarked warehouses and was guarded by an unusually professional security company. He reckoned they were military. I've tried to find out more about this, but I can't find any records of it. But I do remember one of the guys he was with that day used to come by and visit sometimes and referred to the place as the Splintered Woods. I can think of a few things that happened in my first year of college. I used to live in an apartment place on campus with 3 other people. We all had our separate bedrooms but shared a living space. It was on the 7th floor, to give a better idea. Once I woke up at around 2 a.m. to find that my phone was automatically playing a song. I closed the app, but it happened another 2 or 3 times. I would have put this down to my phone being weird, but then one of my roommates told me the exact same thing happened to her as well. This wasn't all. A few days later, I woke up to a beeping sound coming from my phone, and when I checked, it was apparently a sound recording. The duration showed as 0.00 seconds though, which meant that it shouldn't technically play at all. I deleted it immediately. Another time, my roommate and I were watching a movie and had stayed up till 3. It ended and she went to sleep. After a few minutes, she burst into my room and asked me what I was doing. I was confused because I was just in bed, reading. She said that she'd heard some very weird noises from the window, which she assumed I was making to scare her or something. I went to her room and it sounded like heavy breathing and sighing. I told her it was just the wind. We opened the window and saw that the trees were completely still out there. I don't have the same phone, room, or roommates anymore, even though I still stay on campus. It's not even that creepy, but the first time it happened was the first time I ever considered that anything supernatural might just be real. Very occasionally at my desk at work, I'd hear breathing in my left ear. There's a wall behind me, a window to my left, but you can't hear any outside noise. I don't feel a breeze or anything, I just hear it. It's peaceful and sad, like a sigh. My first thought was air conditioning, but it's such a clear sound that just cuts through everything as if it's coming from a whole different world to the general office noise. It's very definitely only in my left ear, and I never hear it anywhere else. Every time it kicks in, I just very calmly get up and leave my desk for 5 minutes, and when I come back, it's gone. I burned about 10 filing cabinets full of papers for my high school friend's dad for less than minimum wage back in 2004. Literally millions of lines of words, maybe even 1 million pages, or close, just tossing them into a barrel, burning. After a few hours, I victoriously tossed in the last folder, and a little sprite of flame shot out and a singed fortune cookie-looking piece of paper floats to the ground in front of me with the words only, "What burns does not return." I still don't know what the frick that was. That probability is just astronomical. Hey, look man, I don't want to jump to any wild conclusions or anything, I'm just saying that you were definitely unwittingly aiding in the removal of evidence for something dark, and that message was the final parting blow from the spirits who'd go on unavenged because of your complicity. Again, not jumping to any conclusions. Not necessarily creepy, but definitely made me question reality. I used to work in a gas station. One regular customer was like night and day. One day he'd be soft-spoken and shy, the next he'd be obnoxious. His cigarette preference also changed from day to day, but he always came in the same work truck with the same guys at the same time of day. One day he walked in and went straight to the bathroom. A minute later, he walked in again and came to the counter. Twins. It took me 8 months to realize they were twins. And not even identical twins either, they just looked pretty similar. I have a story like this. My little sister and I look very much alike despite being 18 months apart. Similar faces, identical build, same height, give or take half an inch. Both of us have dark curly hair, though hers is dyed reddish-brown and has perfect ringlets. Mine is dyed black and has looser curls. Both of them wear glasses. In high school, someone asked her why she changed her clothes between classes. We got a good laugh out of that. Then at Christmas last year, my husband walked into my mom's kitchen and asked why I was making chicken salad when I don't eat meat. It totally wasn't me. I was at the store picking up last-minute items. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I used to visit my grandparents' house with my father every Sunday. A very odd family lived a few houses down. They had a massive property in the middle of old Pasadena. The house had 3 stories, a basement, and a huge backyard. I was introduced to the little girl that lived there at some birthday party. We'd sit on the side of the house and look for 4-leaf clovers. She told me she liked to play in the backyard barn, but nobody was allowed to go back there anymore. She promised there were tons of animals there, and I loved animals, so of course I wanted to go. She said we had to be very quiet and fast, but she'd show it to me. We had to follow this little trail maybe 1/4 of a mile behind the house. There was a ton of foliage around the trail, and it blocked out the building, and there was a barn back there. It was massive and really something you'd see out of a movie. She said it had been in the family for a long time, but the barn looked pristine. When we approached it, she told me we had to be very quiet and that we couldn't go inside. We started playing around the barn, but not directly next to it. We started looking for clovers again for a while, before I remembered she'd mentioned animals. When I asked if we could go see them, she scrunched up her face and got up. She didn't say anything, but did get up and start walking towards the barn. The grass was overgrown right up against the barn, which didn't really make any sense because it looked brand new. The rest of the area was cleared out. The grass was only overgrown up near the barn. She started digging through the grass like she was looking for something. She wouldn't tell me what. The longer I stood next to the barn, the more uncomfortable I got. I felt like we were out somewhere we weren't supposed to be. I became a little distracted and started looking around for our parents or for some adult to jump out and tell us off. When I turned around again, there was a very large pile of bones sitting on the ground. I looked up at her and she was holding a very small skull in her hands. It looked like it would have belonged to a sheep, but was way smaller. She leaned in and whispered, "This is why we can't play back here. My mommy said he doesn't like animals anymore." I'm not sure why I wasn't freaked out. Once I noticed the bones, I could see them scattered all through the grass. We heard her mum calling for us and we ran back. It wasn't until a year or so later at another birthday party that I was in the backyard again. I asked her mum if we could go play by the barn and she looked at me like she'd seen an alien. She said they never had a barn. The trail to it just disappeared. There were big trees blocking the route there and everything. Something weird happened with the adults after that and I wasn't allowed to go to their house anymore. I have no idea what happened. It was very creepy. I'm fairly certain I had an overactive imagination as a child and dreamed all of it up. I asked my father a few years back if he'd ever seen that neighbor's barn, and he had no idea what I was talking about. Why would there be a barn in the middle of a big city? I almost got kidnapped. Maybe. I hailed a lift because I was too drunk to drive. The car pulled up, I got in and was like, "Take me to 123 Fake Street," obviously with my real address. The phone rings and I answer and I hear, "I'm your Lyft driver. I just watched you get into a car that isn't your Lyft. You need to get out right now." Oh, good. "Oh, hey bud, I'm getting a friend to pick me up. Thanks anyway." I hopped out at the red light we were stopped at. The driver and I talked about how one of the reasons we didn't have Lyft in my city for a while was because girls were getting kidnapped and forced into trafficking. So now, since these guys can't use rideshare apps, they're preying on drunk women that they see on the street, hailing a ride, and they just pick them up. Thankfully, I got into the front seat because the back might have had a child lock on. I asked the driver to make sure I got into my house before driving away since old Creeper had my address. Went to pick up my car the next day and not only did I not get trafficked, I didn't get a parking ticket either, so that was cool. I'm definitely a lot more cautious now. It's really weird thinking that it might have been a life-destroying event. I'm the kind of person who keeps my bedroom door closed and locked at all times, no matter what, even if I'm home alone. So like a year ago, it was 1 a.m. and I decided to get a glass of water before going to bed. After coming back in my room, I swear that I closed and locked the door. After about 30 minutes of me dozing in and out of sleep, I suddenly felt all the ambient noise completely dissipate, and I immediately got my "something feels off" feeling. I got up and saw that my door was wide open. It scared the crap out of me as I was home alone. I've just chalked it up to being a one-time mishap on my part. You know, this kinda reads like the opening part of a horror movie, where you're the initial victim, so the audience gets a glimpse of what's to come. I mean, that thing clearly got into your locked bedroom. I guess in this case, it's got a call from its kid's daycare or something and had to bail halfway through though. So you got lucky. I had 2 bananas, connected at the stem part. I broke them into 2, ate one, threw out the peel, and came back for the other one, and it was gone. I live alone. Either I have a rotting banana somewhere in my apartment, or I've gone crazy. Update, it's been weeks and I haven't seen or smelled the other banana. I'll accept that I just went bananas for that moment. I have 2 wireless mouses, one for a work laptop and one for my personal laptop. When I let things get messy, I usually just stack one laptop on top of the closed one underneath, with both mouses near the mousepad. So, I get a call from work saying I need to hop online. I open my work laptop and grab the mouse and start opening my work portal. I open email, I do my usual routine, everything works fine. Then I realize that I'm using the mouse connected to my personal laptop on my work laptop. I shake the mouse. No response. It stopped working once I realized that it shouldn't be working. Ever since then, I found it hard to believe that we don't live in some sort of simulation. I was camping with my family on summer break when I was a kid. The first night we heard some rustling off in the distance, so my dad went to go check it out. He came back and said he found an old dirty sleeping bag with a bunch of trash around it. I took this as him implying that it could have been a camp that got ransacked by a curious bear. We'd hear movement in the tree line for the next couple of nights, and it scared the crap out of me. The last night we were there, I had a nightmare that a bear made it to my tent and was licking and biting my feet. I woke up from the dream and shined my watch light into the dirt-covered wrinkly face of an elderly man. He was sucking on my toes, and he immediately exited my tent and took off right after we made eye contact. I still don't know if it was my imagination or not all these years later. I never told anyone, and I have nightmares about it often. When I was a kid between 8 or 9, I used to wake up every night to headlights coming through my bedroom window. The lights would then stop and turn off. Not as if a car drove by, but as if they were being turned off. Then, the long shadows of a man, as if he were looking through my window, would pass by and stop in front of it. I'd lay really still and pretend nothing had happened. Every night for months. Eventually, I convinced myself it was my imagination. Now that I think back, it stopped when my stepdad moved in. My mum was single. But I was convinced it wasn't real. Across the street lived my best friend whose mum was also single, and she refused to sleep in her bedroom. Her window faced my window. She told me years later it was because every night a man would park in her side yard and walk over to my yard. The long shadows were from the light in her yard. She eventually decided it was my dad checking on us and never told me until I was a teenager. It wasn't my dad, I asked him. So I thought I was crazy and hallucinating for years. Perhaps I wasn't, or two kids were having odd dreams at the same time every night. I was playing with our dog in the living room. At the time I was around 9 years old. We were doing our usual only play like this when mum isn't home or she'll tell us to stop kind of playing, so basically playing fetch in the living room. At one point I threw the toy, which caused it to ricochet out of the living room into the kitchen. Fran, that's our dog name, chased it and disappeared around the corner to get it. At that exact moment, the front door opened and my mum walked in with Fran on a leash after a 2-hour walk over the beach and dunes. I tried to explain, but I can't. I played with him for at least 15 minutes in, apparently, my imagination, but I just don't believe that. I worked at a small retail stop that mostly sold small accessories and clothes. I've never really believed in ghosts, but my co-workers always swore the place was haunted. Lights would flicker randomly and canvases would fall violently to the ground despite my efforts of propping them up so that they didn't. The thing that really made me question everything happened when I was closing alone at night. We had a sunglass display in the middle of the store. Just a flat glass shelf with a bunch of sunglasses laid out nicely on top. I walked to the register and heard this huge crash. I looked back and all of the sunglasses were on the floor. It looked like someone just took their arm and dragged it across the shelf, pushing them all off. There wasn't anything above the display, so nothing could have knocked it off. I don't really have an explanation for that. It was right as I was about to close, too. He was a rude ghost. I dreamed it was dark, raining, and I was in the woods walking towards a campfire. There were 3 men around it whom I'd never seen before. One was wearing a shirt and pants with huge white and black horizontal stripes on them, such as a prisoner might wear. I couldn't figure out why I wasn't scared in my dream. Fast forward 10 months later, we were hunting and camping. A friend brings along 3 of his friends that we'd never met before. I have to go to the bathroom. We'd buried a 50-gallon drum and put a seat on it. My husband walks with me since it's dark. We start back and it starts to rain. We get to the clearing and there's 3 of his friends around the fire, one wearing that white and black outfit I described before. I wasn't afraid in my dream because my husband was behind me and I just couldn't see him. Nobody believes me to this day. Milked to Death, the franchise that went from iconic to embarrassing. SpongeBob. Steven Hillenburg wanted no spin-offs and did his best to steer the ship of his creation in his later years. Now there's 2 spin-offs, both are bad and Nickelodeon has no plans on stopping, with no creator to tell them no. For those curious, Steven had a set of rules he put in place for the show, such as no spin-offs, no revealing what the Krabby Patty secret formula is, and SpongeBob can never get his boating license. They literally waited for him to die so they could start making these spin-offs. It's absolutely disgusting behavior. I didn't know about any spin-offs, but I've googled and oh boy. There's a spin-off called Camp Coral that's all the characters as kids at a summer camp and some as counselors. Let's also point out the fact that this completely negates the events of the actual series, since most characters didn't meet as kids. There's also a Patrick spin-off that's just started. It's straight up called The Patrick Star Show. Did you know that Total Drama Island has a baby spin-off? Not cool, dudes. Sharknado. It was funny the first time, but I was horrified to learn they made 6. Highlight of the whole series was in 3 or 4 when heavily pregnant Tara Reid was eaten by a shark in space, and the offending shark crash landed on Earth. Everyone was like, oh no, Tara's dead. And then Tara Reid cuts a hole in the side of the shark and pushes her newborn baby she'd birthed inside the shark out the hole. There are meaningful life events I have very hazy recollections of, yet I remember that moment clear as yesterday. Ted Bundy. Not a franchise per se, but every time I see a new movie coming out with some former teen heartthrob playing him, I want to hurl. I liked the Zac Efron one, he really nailed it. However, it teed me off that they didn't talk about the more gruesome aspects of his murders, like the consumption and desecration of the bodies. They should really tell the whole story or nothing at all. I also liked the documentary where the real Liz talked about her experiences. I love the Netflix documentary where they spoke to a woman who went to camp with him and she was just like, oh, Ted? Yeah, he was a frickin' idiot. A nice change from the almost worshipping and fascinated tone that other people speak about him with. Yeah, the fact that we go out of our way to encourage the whole hot guy element of this person you would never want to meet is pretty crazy. Like, okay, have someone appropriately handsome to go with the cautionary tale, I guess, but don't forget to accurately frame the length and breadth of all the awful things they did. Okay. The Walking Dead, Fear the Walking Dead, The Walking Dead World Beyond, The Walking Dead Origins, 3 confirmed Walking Dead movies, The Walking Dead Red Machete, The Walking Dead Torn Apart, The Walking Dead The Oath, Carol and Daryl spin-off titled TBA, Fear the Walking Dead Flight 462, Game Time, The Walking Dead Road to Survival, The Walking Dead Season 1, The Walking Dead Season 2, The Walking Dead Michonne, The Walking Dead A New Frontier, The Walking Dead The Final Season, The Walking Dead Survival Instinct, The Walking Dead Overkill's The Walking Dead, The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, The Walking Dead Onslaught, The Walking Dead Dead Reckoning, The Walking Dead Assault, The Walking Dead Road to Survival, The Walking Dead No Man's Land, The Walking Dead Left Behind. Honorable mentions, The Talking Dead, all the comics I guess. I bet I'm missing stuff too, honestly. Update. Yep, I missed some things. MTG Secret Lair, The Walking Dead Bridge Constructor, The Walking Dead Ride, and The Walking Dead Slot Machines. And if you want to count it, Ride with Normal Readers. It's called Ride with Norman Readers, but the author wrote normal, and that made me laugh. Nickelodeon needs to leave the Fairly Odd Parents alone. I dropped it for good pretty much after that dog came, which they later removed from the show. Now they've got this new girl, Chloe, who just like the dog, didn't make the show better in my opinion. You remember Ice Age? So many damn sequels, even as a kid I thought it was too much. You want something to binge? The Land Before Time has 14 movies. Today I learned that George Lucas and Steven Spielberg executive produced only the first one. Anytime someone wants me to guess their favorite movie, I just go through all of the Land Before Time movies. Eventually they get annoyed and just tell me. You have to appreciate the dedication to the bit involved in having all 14 titles memorized and ready to go. The Kissing Booth. 13 Reasons Why. More like 13 Seasons Why. I don't know, the progression from the aftermath of the girl's tragic end to a mentally ill person talking to the ghosts of 2 offenders during a fake school weapon event felt extremely natural to me. If I didn't know you were talking about the show, I would wonder if you'd had a stroke remembering Sixth Sense. Kardashian or Jenner anything. This is something that's been bothering me for years. The progressive commercials with flow. What the frick are they still doing making these? Some sociologists found that the literal pain response of advertising cringe sticks in our memory better than commercials that are purely informative. And they're easier to make than commercials that are actually enjoyable. The Bachelor and the Bachelorette, and multiple spin-offs. Why so many shows about people trying to hook up? That's a Saturday night. Grey's Anatomy. My brother convinced my dad and I to watch it. We got all the way through season 12 until we were like, screw it, this show is just dog crap. I'm forcing myself to watch it at this point. Just Jesus, if all your original main characters are dead or gone, just quit the frickin' show already. Terminator. I can actually respect the third one and Salvation, that while bad, they had a good premise. But Genesis was doing a 180 over the shark. And then they followed it up with Dark Fate, a franchise almost 40 years old, and Arnold is in damn near all of them. The only thing I can say about that is at least they didn't go the de-aging route. And after all that time, they still haven't shown how the war ends. Law and Order. Law and Order Criminal Intent. Law and Order Special Victims Unit. Law and Order Trial by Jury, Law and Order Los Angeles, Law and Order True Crime, Law and Order Organized Crime. I'm starting to think that the 2001 SNL skit Law and Order Parking Violations Unit wasn't a skit so much as a trial balloon. Despicable Me and the Minions that have been milked like heck since 2010. I still think it's being pumped out, but those little yellow Tic Tacs curdled years ago. It really says a lot about the oversaturation of Minions and memes and marketing that it feels like an incredibly milked-dry franchise when it only has 3 films and a spin-off. Not that that's a small amount of films, but it feels like there's been 20 of them. The Purge. I will say the cowboy screaming, "It's the Forever Purge!" in the new trailer makes me cackle, so that's something. FIFA. I don't play it, but my friends who do tell me nothing changes. They're not going to stop that golden goose, though. SpongeBob Seasons 1 through 3 and all the meme templates that it spawned will forever be something I'll cherish. I wish it ended after the original movie. I think Steven Hillenburg is rolling over in his grave over how the show and movie franchises are now. The Saw series. We don't need 15 more hyper-unrealistic torture techniques and a drawn-out plot that makes no sense at this point. Please stop. Not to mention the crazy effects going on when the games are rolling. It's as if the editors took these scenes, tested every video effect, sped it up, and then forgot to choose one and delete the rest, so they left them all in. The Hangover was perfect. Shouldn't have milked it at all. Yeah. The third movie ruined Andy in the office as well. It's almost impressive that they screwed the man across two popular things. Ben 10 has been massacred, man. The original series will always be the best. Also, Boruto is not very good, if not bad, to be honest. Grand Theft Auto 5. It's been 11 years and we still haven't gotten a new game yet. Online is the cash cow for Rockstar Games. GTA 5 has been on 3 PlayStations, and meanwhile, the PS2 had 3 GTAs. Remember when they said that also includes stocks and multiplayer at one point, so people could invest in fake brands in-game and then impact them by blowing up cars and robbing those banks and stores, and making and losing real money that way? The Walking Dead. The show has run its course. Let it die already. But isn't the point that they can't die? Is it still running? What the frick? I stopped after seasons 4 and 5, literally the same each season. Runs into group ends up being bad, they kill someone, they fight said group, zombies come in right after, run to new location, run into another group, rinse and repeat. 90 Day Fiancé, 90 Day Fiancé the other way, 90 Day Fiancé before the 90 days, 90 Day Fiancé happily ever after, 90 Day Fiancé what now, 90 Day Fiancé pillow talk, 90 Day Fiancé just landed, 90 Day Fiancé self-quarantined, 90 Day Fiancé just landed, 90 Day Fiancé self-quarantined, 90 Day Fiancé B90 strikes back, 90 Day Fiancé happily ever after strikes back, 90 Day Fiancé 90 days bears all, 90 Day Fiancé the other way strikes back, 90 Day Fiancé love games, 90 Day Fiancé The Single Life, 90 Day Journeys, 90 Day Diaries, Darcy and Stacey The 90 Days spin-off, The Family Chantel spin-off. There may be a few obnoxious lists in this video, folks, as people seem determined to lay out the receipts for just why their show is as bad as they say. Not that they had to do that. Some franchises would have had the stink of mediocrity just from their name recognition alone. Case in point, The Real Housewives of Orange County, The Real Housewives of New York City, The Real Housewives of Atlanta, The Real Housewives of New Jersey, The Real Housewives of DC, The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, The Real Housewives of Miami, The Real Housewives of Potomac, The Real Housewives of Dallas, The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, The Real Housewives of Melbourne, The Real Housewives of Sydney, The Real Housewives of Vancouver, The Real Housewives of Toronto, Les Vrais Housewives, The Real Housewives of Athens, Felicegek Luxus Kvittelben, The Real Housewives of Dinapoli, The Real Housewives of Nairobi, The Real Housewives of Auckland, The Real Housewives of Johannesburg, The Real Housewives of Durban, The Real Housewives of Cheshire, The Real Housewives of Jersey, The Real Housewives of Mars, The Real Housewives of Uranus. TLC. Just shut the whole network down. I love how TLC stands for The Learning Channel, and it's as bad as the History Channel in that regard. I'm sorry, hillbillies finding logs in the bayou and ancient aliens is not history. It was better when it was the channel about America in World War II, and even then it wasn't that great. Call of Duty. At this point, I'm just waiting for COD early warfare where the campaign is you murdering hapless Neanderthals with throwing spears, and the multiplayer is a mess of rage nerds running through a historical torchlit cave network, quick-scoping each other with lengths of sharpened wood. Give me 13 reasons why that show had a second season, forget a third and fourth, possibly a fifth, when the protagonist dies at the end of season 1. The Simpsons is clawing at its life support machine, begging to be put out of its misery. It's one of my all-time favorite shows, yet I've seen less than half of its episodes. Stop, they're already dead. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? High School Musical, the series.
Actually, the title is ridiculous, but it's not actually that bad. It's filmed office style and it's pretty funny considering how it's a show for kids and teens. No joke, season 1 is very tongue-in-cheek and has some of the best music I've heard in a while, like acoustic cover song music. I stopped watching 3 episodes into season 2 because I got bored and it feels like the writers already told the story that they wanted to tell in 1.
Naruto. OG anime and Shippuden have tons of filler just to keep the anime going in a weekly format. After Naruto ended, they launched Boruto, where the main antagonist, at least at the beginning, is an alien and that's just too much. You can skip 100 or almost 100 episodes of Naruto towards the end before Shippuden, and it's like if nothing in between ever happened, and you leave off with Naruto in the hospital, and start up at the halfway point of the episode with Naruto in the hospital, like they only talk about a filler character once. It was so insane to me that you could just skip so many episodes and not miss a thing back when I watched it. And then like half of Shippuden is flashbacks to the point where they become a meme during its run. Like, remember the swing? It appeared in the final episodes. It's to the point where I can predict where an anime is going to do a flashback scene, because it seems plenty of them learned it from Naruto. Not really a particular franchise, but Disney is doing way too many live-action remakes of their classics. Also, the Toy Story franchise. Toy Story isn't being nearly as milked as other franchises. Pixar maintained its high standard of quality in all 4 movies. Even though Toy Story 3 would have been a good ending point, and Toy Story 4 was very different, it's still a good movie. The Fast and the Furious. Do we really need a dozen or almost a dozen movies? Ask me again after F12, Gravitational Assist Maneuver. They have to make one where they drive so fast that they end up time-traveling to the past and then they race with old-timey cars. Fast and Furious. Blast from the past. Or maybe just Past and Furious? In the first movie, they were stealing VCR players. There needs to be one where they're like all old and grey, the slow and the mildly peeved, and then you pulled the plug already. Transformers. Oh, you'd better mean the movie franchise, otherwise I'll respectfully disagree with your opinion on a franchise I love. I haven't watched The Simpsons in over a decade, but I always saw commercials for new episodes. So one night I was flipping through channels and saw it on. Figured I'd just watch it and see how the story and series had progressed. Dear God, it was awful. They took the theory of Flanderization and just ran with it. At this point, all of the characters were just the most distilled versions of themselves. Homer is just a self-centered buffoon, Marge is a helicopter mum, Lisa's an obnoxious know-it-all, and Bart is a mixture of pranks and millennial buzzwords. The jokes were boring, flat, and ill-timed. The supporting cast were just one-liners that served to move the uninteresting story along, etc., etc. How is this show still on? They do a thing a lot now where someone will do something out of the ordinary, and instead of letting the audience work out what's meant to be funny, another character explains what's crazy about it. I'm not describing it very well, but that's basically The Simpsons now. Predator and Alien. They could have been good, but weren't, and Predator's sequels were especially bad. Maybe they should just fight each other. That'll breathe life into the franchise. We got a damn good arcade game and FPS from those games. I'd take another Alien Isolation-style game as well. As much as I love the John Wick series, I think it'll probably get milked just because people love it. Hopefully not, but time will tell. American Idol and The Masked Singer and America's Got Talent or America Wants to See Your Poop Hole. These shows are cringe and have been for the past 20 years. They need to stop. The DC-verse on the CW. Ted Bundy movies. We as a society should have progressed past the need for Ted Bundy movies. Fast and Furious. Sorry to my family in advance. Pokemon's getting there, and Harry Potter was fine as a book and movie, but a musical? Not a franchise, but a person. Conor McGregor. Now that he's solved in terms of MMA and no longer looks like a world beater, not to mention an injury that guarantees he'll never be the same again, the UFC is pretty much only going to use him for his name ID and sell as many pay-per-views as possible until his obnoxious fan club realizes they've hitched their wagon to a perennial loser and insufferable prick. He'll be squeezed for every last drop of his vitality by the UFC, but he'll still make tons of money to get beaten to a pulp by hungrier, more focused fighters. One can only hope he's invested some wisely though, because once the rubes realize he's washed up, those million-buy PPVs are gonzo. And good riddance. He's an awful human being. Screw Conor McGregor. The best description of Conor's late career I ever came across was in some YouTube comment section, I think. He's lost what made him great. Poverty. He's too rich to be a good fighter anymore, and just mails it in. Believe it or not, this answer was actually submitted before McGregor's presidential campaign in Ireland was launched, so I think we can safely say that the milking is getting painful even for those of us who don't watch MMA and whose nips aren't actively being pulled. Please know, I know that this is the stupidest timeline, but we're not ready for that presidency. And if you're just now finding out that he has a serious political campaign, I'm sorry. Okay. So, in the short span of time between recording this video and editing, Conor McGregor has actually ended his Irish presidential election bid. And thank frick for that. One less stupid thing going on in the world. The entire Arrowverse, which was unfortunately bad from the beginning, but we didn't see it until now. Much as I love the series as a whole, the mainline Pokemon games have been going downhill in more recent years. Sure, they're still very fun to play, and they're a great way to play with friends, but something about the newer ones, I'm looking at the base game Sword and Shield games, feels so lifeless and disingenuous. It's like the life has been sucked out of them and they've become this linear hand-holding tour rather than the explore until you're tired of it and then explore some more style that it used to have. I'm really hoping the Gen 4 remake brings back some of the good stuff Sword and Shield's DLC brought in. Otherwise, they're just milking a dead horse at this point.
Is The Walking Dead still on?
Shockingly, yes. I always wondered who the frick was watching that, only to go visit my parents and see them still watching it. This was last season, but I was still baffled they kept up with it. Too many Fast and Furious. When you can name a movie F9 and it's still recognizable, that's a problem. Call of Duty Finest Hour, Call of Duty 2, Call of Duty Big Red 1, Call of Duty 3, Call of Duty Roads to Victory, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare DS, Call of Duty World at War, Call of Duty World at War Final Fronts, Call of Duty World at War DS, Call of Duty World at War Zombies, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 Mobilized, Call of Duty Black Ops, Call of Duty Black Ops DS, Call of Duty Black Ops Zombies, Call of Duty Black Ops 2, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 Defiance, Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, Call of Duty Black Ops 3, Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified, Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, Call of Duty World War II, Call of Duty Black Ops 4, Call of Duty Modern Warfare, Call of Duty Warzone, Call of Duty Mobile, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. Supernatural. The first 5 seasons were fun, but it ended up getting dragged out way too long and turned into an incomprehensible disaster. Dean dies and disappears. Oh, he's back. Sam dies and disappears. Oh, he's back. They fight and split. Oh, they made up. Repeat for 384,739,363 seasons. Star Wars. Disney should have skipped making episodes and just stuck with Star Wars stories. Grand Theft Auto 5. Family Guy. It just isn't funny anymore.
Hey Lois, remember that time a guy on Reddit said our show wasn't funny anymore?
Flashback to a cartoonishly ugly version of the narrator recording this video. American Dad is way better and it's actually funny, although that too has been going on quite a while now. All of the Terminator films after 2 don't exist. The cell phone industry. They should do a phone release every 3 years, not every 4 months. In fairness, the flagships are usually once a year. The phones released in between them are usually lower spec models for different consumer markets. Besides, not everyone upgrades at the exact same time. Technology does improve enough to warrant a newer model. Now, if you'd said people shouldn't be buying new phones that frequently, I'd agree. Jurassic World, and especially its sequels and any planned spin-offs, don't need to exist. Nothing else has come close to the magic or spirit of the original. This is an unpopular opinion, but superhero movies as a whole, they're going to become like westerns, and they're going to be so bloated and oversaturated that people are going to stop making them. But by the looks of things, that's not going to be anytime soon.
I'm actually very curious when that will happen. I mean, superhero films and shows have pretty much been the past 20 years at this point, with some of that even going back to the 90s, really.
Selena. Not going to say how I know, but I know for a fact her dad is a pathetic, money-hungry butthole. Always has been and always will be. First, he forced his children to practice in a band that none of them wanted to be in to help make money for his restaurant. Then he controlled her career in almost every way, controlled her love life, hired a convicted felon to be her fan club manager. She was convicted of embezzlement, the very thing she did to Selena, which Selena confronted her about. Then that very same felon sticks her hand in the cookie jar, surprised Pikachu face, and is caught red-handed. Shoots and kills Selena. Refused to save her life by agreeing to a simple blood transfusion, yet she was married and nobody contacted her husband to ask him what to do. And finally, continues to make money off his dead daughter in every way possible. He was a smart man and I feel like he got away with a whole lot. I have family that know him personally who agree with me. I hope that's enough context. Assassin's Creed for sure. I found AC to be weird and uninteresting when they shifted from the Assassins vs. Templars story to the First Civilization nonsense. And now we have literal gods and mythical creatures running around. It sucked the immersion right out of it for me. Assassin's Creed was great because I felt like I was exploring Jerusalem in the Crusades or Venice during the Renaissance, and the feeling of all that had important historical implications. Now we have Kill Medusa, and it's such a bizarre direction to take after the first few games tried so hard to maintain historical accuracy. World of Warcraft. I know it hasn't been milked recently, but the X-Files. The truth is no longer out there, and it breaks my heart. Anything Disney owns. They've run out of ideas, so just draining their franchises dry with remakes seems to be the way to go. Bow to the mouse. Fortnite. Its prime is over, but they think they can just buy their way back by adding everything from Halo to God of War to Aliens. The Sims. I don't even want to know how much money it would cost for all expansions for just Sims 4. Hot take, anything you can think of as a franchise. Schizophrenia's first clue. The exact moment they knew something was wrong. I'm on medication for schizoaffective disorder, and it's helped me tremendously. However, before I was diagnosed, I spent most days in fear of being alone in my home because of the visual hallucinations, even though I'd isolate myself to my bedroom. Some of them were in my peripheral vision, but I used to see hands snaking over the backs of the furniture like couches or beds. It would terrify me. Also, as soon as I'd begin to relax, especially before bed, I'd hear voices and deep, loud growls. Once I had a friend staying with me and she didn't respond to it, and I realized that maybe something was wrong. It took 3 years after that for me to seek medical attention. I'd think it was getting better because it would stop, just to return a few days or weeks later. Ugh, I wonder how many horror movie scenes are inspired by real hallucinations. I was in college. So much stress and anxiety was the cause of it. I began first seeing shadow people, some passing by on a whim. I can clearly remember one that looked like it was wearing a dress, going so quickly down the hall, but with it came voices. Jumbled gibberish with high notes of laughter. Then came the whispers. I got on medication soon after. During this time, my anxiety wouldn't let up. Also, I saw many things as a child, too. I don't hear voices, just noises and sounds, like the faucet running, window taps, footsteps, doors closing. There's always a television on. I think the first kind of event was when I was 20, living with a roommate. I'd been hearing a radio playing loud music outside in the middle of the night. It had been playing for an hour or two, and I just snapped, jumped out of bed and tore through the house to get outside and asked them to turn it down. There was no radio, and when I opened the door, everything was quiet. Roomie was upset that I woke her up. Though before that, I'd see shadow people when I drove. There'd be jaywalking across the street, ladies holding children's hands, men pushing a shopping cart. That and the stupid cameras. I'd always assumed that a room has a camera. In the vents, usually. There was always someone watching. There's always someone watching? Yeah. Since I was very young, I've had this sensation. All of my thoughts are being monitored in some way. My private thoughts are public somehow, so self-policing my mind was one of my fixes. My intrusive thoughts never seemed outside of me, but many of my paranoid delusions still existed. They never went away. But I've learned to limit the amount of influence they have on me. Many of my thoughts are beneficial as well, kind of like a super brutal coach. Not polite and soothing, but in many cases accurate. No, this one symptom doesn't mean you have schizophrenia. Yes, this is a common experience for many people. If it doesn't control your life, change your behavior, or make you afraid, then it's not a problem for you, and I'm glad to hear it. Yikes. Well, so far I'm just relieved I don't have this. But people who do, how do you get by? You've got to respect those who can deal with this with or without meds and the right treatment, particularly the horror show of hallucinations for any period of time. I'd be a nervous wreck. My first symptoms were visual and auditory illusions, specifically speech. I didn't hear anything else at the start. I found out something was up during a conversation with my friends. A person just randomly joined the conversation, and since nobody else acted, I thought I was the only one who didn't know the person, and I rolled with it. A bit later, my friends asked me who I was speaking to, concerned. I pointed to the newcomer, and he gave a little wave back. Of course, I was the only one who saw him. Ironically, at the time, I thought everyone but me was crazy. After being diagnosed with schizophrenia, the guy accepted himself as part of my imagination. Or technically, I imagined a guy who accepted himself in my imagination. Psychology dealing with schizophrenia is mind-boggling. I am not your typical case. I was 30 years old when I started to hear voices. I was getting ready for a camping trip with the family when I heard someone say, "You're doing it wrong." I was in my garage by myself getting my boat ready, and it made my blood run cold. I looked everywhere thinking someone was playing a trick on me, but I found nobody. The next 4 months were a living hell at my house. I started seeing people in my house, at work, even outside. They would just stand in corners or walk by a doorway. I was literally freaking out non-stop. I thought it would go away, but it didn't. I finally told my wife when the voices started telling me to attack my family. My wife was very supportive. We even went to the doctor's appointments together. After a brief stay in the hospital, I got my meds worked out and the voices and people stopped manifesting. From time to time, I still hear something or see something and I know it's not real and just ignore it and move on with whatever I'm doing. I wasn't social because voices told me people were plotting against me. After being in enough situations where I was forced to be social, I noticed that a lot of people were actually pretty nice, and the ones who weren't didn't care enough about me to do anything. Once I realized that was a lie, I started looking for other things to be suspicious about. I'm in a much better place now. Okay, so I'm getting a lot of questions, which is totally fine. I'm happy to answer them. Here's some answers to the most common questions I'm getting. The voices are not internal, they're an audible voice that I can hear. The voices are not my own voice or the voice of anyone I know. They're unique. Not all the voices are bad. Now that I'm in a place where the bad ones don't affect me as much, there are some nice ones too. The voices don't have a set volume. I don't hear voices as often now, and when I do, it tends to be muffled, like when you butt dial someone and they're trying to get your attention from your pocket. But they can range anywhere from a whisper to a shout. No, I don't think schizophrenia is a decent movie concept on its own. I'd love to have more schizophrenic representation, but guy has schizophrenia isn't enough to make a good story. Alright, maybe I should be more clear here. I'm not saying movies about schizophrenia are bad, but schizophrenic shouldn't be a sole character trait. A Beautiful Mind isn't man is schizophrenic as much as a man is schizophrenic and a genius mathematician and a husband and father. I'm not sure what the first time was, but there are certainly some things that stand out in my mind. When I was 12-ish, I was terrified of the spiders in my room. My mum thought it was because I was afraid of spiders, but individually, I didn't mind them. However, I strongly believed that the spiders on my ceilings and walls coordinated to do me harm. I pretended to be sick in bed one day because there was a spider directly above my doorframe and one besides my light switch, and I could smell an ambush brewing. Another time I was in the shower and something told me I was dead, very convincingly. I checked the mirror immediately because TV has conditioned me to think that dead people don't have reflections, I guess. So I finished up in the shower and got out and went into the living room where my family was. Of course, I wasn't dead, but they didn't really acknowledge me when I walked into that room, so I just kind of accepted that I was dead. I went to bed, and for the whole night I thought that I'd died until morning came around. Those two anecdotes are kind of light mode, I think. The one thing that's always been present is music. I hear music almost 24/7. I didn't even realize it was a weird thing until I started questioning why other people wore headphones. Finally, when I was around 17, I really started to get paranoid. Like ludicrously paranoid. I had a small apartment on the second floor of a building, and I kept the blinds and windows closed 100% of the time. I expected at any moment for a grenade to be thrown in. I hated leaving my place because there were so many people. I devised strategies for passing them when meeting on a sidewalk. I checked windows and rooftops for snipers. One time, there were too many people on a bus I was supposed to take, so I ended up walking about 40 kilometers instead. At one point, I think I really started to break from reality, actually, because I vividly remember trying to work out where the stones on the path in front of me stopped and the air began, and not really figuring it out. Shortly thereafter, I completely broke down and went about rebuilding myself. My mum has this and constantly talks to the FBI and Obama. She also talks to her doctor, who tells her not to take her meds. We've had her committed a few times because she'd get very angry and disappear for a whole day in her car and get lost. She also doesn't believe my dad is her husband. I have a recording of her talking about it, and it's chilling. It's a really unfortunate and life-stealing disease. I could go on for years talking about the different things she's seen and the people she talks to. I'm really sorry for anyone dealing with this, and please keep taking your meds. It does help. Just know that for anyone hearing this that has a friend or relative with this disorder, they believe everything they hear and see. It's as real to them as the air you breathe. Don't get mad at them, try to help them. Thank you. Yeah, the importance of a supportive family network has got to be so key to people with this condition coming out of it with happy and fulfilling lives, just like the rest of us, I suppose. But in this case, having people to reassure and recognize flare-ups so that they can help out. Finally, something for me to answer. I was in the prodrome phase, which was early signs. I was constantly going to doctors complaining about self-deleting thoughts, anxiety, or stomach problems. I was always brushed off because I have a degree and a good job, but I was psychotic. I knew things were off and there was something severely wrong with me, but one second I believed in mental health and the next second the delusions took over and meds were a sham perpetrated by the man. Cool fact, I actually predicted my hospitalization here on the internet. I made a post on Reddit asking when I should go to the loony bin, and sure enough later, within the week, I was hospitalized for my first time ever. I've been diagnosed as schizoaffective, the bipolar type. Basically, that means the symptoms of the two disorders present themselves. Something wasn't quite right when my memory started to decline. Then my condition got worse, if that makes sense. I'd start walking somewhere, and halfway there I'd forget how I'd arrived at my location or why I was there. I thought I'd stumbled out of a dream. Then I started giving too much weight to ridiculous thoughts and ideas. Normally, humans can dismiss stupid ideas like their thoughts are conspiring with the universe to give people cancer or that everyone's conspiring against you, but sometimes they go a little too far. I didn't see anything explicitly wrong because I was still functioning well enough. I just chalked it up to my overactive imagination. I should have gotten help when I started seeing and hearing things. Shadow people lunging at me, following me, bugs on my skin. Took a certain episode until I did. Meds were a tremendous help, and now, in my life, I'm doing very well. I'm schizotypal. When I was 12, I stopped going to school. I can't really pinpoint what exactly made me stop going, other than perhaps an instinct that something wasn't right. I felt uncomfortable all of the time. It felt like too much effort to keep up with the social things of school, even though nothing out of the ordinary had happened. And I didn't want to be a part of it anymore, and I became depressed. I think the great discomfort and this really deep feeling of not being like everyone else were the first signs. I was a completely normal kid, but I just always had this feeling that there was something off about who I was. I remember having paranoid thoughts that I was actually 2 years older than my parents told me I was. Sometimes other people seemed cartoonish and one-dimensional to me, even sometimes questioned if other people were real, and I was genuinely convinced that nobody actually liked me, even though I had plenty of friends. Sometimes my tongue would feel huge in my mouth, or I'd feel like my feet were miles apart, even though I could clearly see that they were right next to each other. But of course, as a kid, I didn't know that any of these things were abnormal, and you don't really tell people either. So it wasn't until I stopped going to school that my parents had any idea that something was wrong. I went through psychoeducation, I'm not sure if that's the English term though, in the psychiatry a few years ago, and it was really helpful for me to learn about the typical early signs of psychosis. So I know what to pay attention to and when to slow down and take a breath. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? When I knew something was wrong, it was so brief. After that, I was just sucked into delusions and fear. Time was passing strangely, and my memories are fuzzy about the worst of it. I remember realizing I couldn't function at work. I asked my boss if I could leave, and I walked home. I didn't live far away. I called either my boyfriend at the time or my mum on the way, and I'd say something was wrong and I needed help. I'd been prescribed some anti-anxiety medication shortly before that, but it put me into a downward spiral. I was trying to save the world. I wanted to solve major problems like world hunger, problems that I had no business trying to figure out. Something had happened with my vision. I've never experienced this before, and it was so bizarre. I don't know if it had anything to do with schizophrenia or if it was a side effect of the medication, but lights. Just regular lights in an office or the sun outside were so bright. I remember when I finally went to a treatment center to speak with someone, I had to squint everywhere I went. It was painful. Also, I remember being asked why I couldn't look at the person who was giving me the questionnaire. I just thought there was too much light around them. So I'm pretty sure that I really did go through that. Nobody ever explained to me why I went through this. If anyone knows anything about this or has an experience for something similar, I'm all ears. Anyway, the main parts, feeling watched. And for some reason, I knew where the cameras were. In vents, cracks in walls, old punctures from thumbtacks. Radio, movies, and television were really tough for me. I remember being in my car and hearing a voice coming out of my radio talking to me. Some voice explaining that they were just checking up on me and that they'd be back later. It was hard to watch TV and enjoy my shows. I did get hospitalized when this happened. On the way, when I was in the ambulance, I thought that I was on my way to become part of a team that was going to save the world. Obama was leading it and he'd picked me. Yeah, I know. And what else? I didn't think my mother was really my mother. She was chosen to take care of me. And my father, my parents had separated when I was young, by the way, he had only really left because he was testing my character, and once I was proven a good person, he'd come back into my life with plenty of money I could live off of. That delusion is pretty embarrassing. I'm glad that there was at least some part of me that said, help, while it was all happening, and I was able to get some medication. It's the most frightening thing I've ever been through, and I feel fortunate that I've been able to gain stability and work and to be happy since all of that. I think the cameras are an interesting recurring component of some of the cases we've read about here. And this is, the second time that Obama has come up? Albeit in a very different way to the first. who was more sure that they were being targeted by him. I guess pointing out that the leader of the free world isn't personally focusing on you at any point in time isn't a helpful comment, as the notions these people get are incredibly strong. Maybe just a symptom to look out for in those we know. I've had voices all my life, and at times in my life it's been absolutely terrifying. I wake up many, many times in my life thinking that events have happened when they haven't at all. And only sometimes, even years later, will I realize that something that I thought had happened never happened at all. I'm a songwriter, and I'll wake up with songs fully formed, not only verses, but choruses, rhymes, melodies, and everything, complete, and for a long time I thought my brain was just running a song that I'd heard at some point on the radio. But I only after a time realized that these were originals, and I just started catching them. Remember waking up one time thinking that I'd nervously pulled out all of the hair of half of one of my eyebrows, and I walked around for a week waiting for the hair to grow back and being just self-conscious about it. Only then to realize that at the end of the week when I looked in the mirror, I hadn't pulled any out, and I must have dreamt it and thought it was real. I used to think I could see people that weren't there. The girl from The Ring used to stand in the corner of my room and point at me while I tried to sleep. That and an old guy who would show up from time to time and wave. I also thought my mother was trying to poison me with her food, so I taught myself to cook, just to make sure the food was safe, for other reasons as well. I wasn't diagnosed as schizoaffective until I'd had my first psychotic break a couple of years ago, when I thought people were watching me through the television and following me everywhere I went. I still fight with the paranoia on a seemingly daily basis, and as such, I don't leave the house for usually more than an hour to go to the gym or 20 minutes to go to the store a few times a week. It doesn't help that my dad built spy software for the government when we first moved to the US. It makes for a shadowy group of people potentially working for the government, following you around, asking you very personal questions when you're just sitting at a cafe, almost plausible, which is just frickin' terrible to deal with when you have to question reality all the time. I noticed something wasn't right, probably around 19 years old. Because schizophrenia makes you think your hallucinations are normal, the first time I heard a random voice talking to me, I didn't realize it shouldn't be happening or it wasn't real. I thought there really was a woman talking to me despite the fact that there wasn't anyone there. Anyway, I'm still not sure how much of my major depression was due to the horrible relationship I was in and how much of it was the schizophrenia. But around 19 years old, everything just hit the fan at once. I couldn't put up with everything that was happening. I had this disconnected from reality feeling happening, and I was starting to act strangely, like sending cryptic messages to my ex's friends. I was slowly starting to go downhill. There were signs that I didn't realize, like people telling me I was blacking out and doing strange things, like staring out the window for an hour, just standing there while a group of people outside looked at me like, what is she doing? Or putting out cigarettes on my bare foot. I didn't realize it was happening at all. Like when I blacked out, my mind created an alternate reality that seemed totally normal. Like when I put the cigarettes out on my foot, I was thinking about it, but I didn't realize I was actually doing it. I thought I was just walking down the sidewalk. Little stuff like this just kept building and building until I felt I was losing my mind, and I had to go to see a doctor. He diagnosed me with depression and mild psychosis, and that diagnosis has changed to schizoaffective with depression, which is basically schizophrenia combined with a mood disorder. It really stinks to be this kind of sick. Even medicated, I'm not fully normal. I have a family history of schizophrenia, so the possibility scares me a bit. I sometimes dream as an entirely different person, and I occasionally hear noises like screams or explosions, in a half-awake state. In fact, I dream almost constantly when sleeping. It's frustrating because I feel like I never get an escape from life. I have no idea if these are indicative of anything, but it does worry me a tad. Schizoaffective here. I don't hear voices, but I have massive delusions that the world around me is totally a construct, and I'm actually a homeless person living behind a dumpster or a working girl in a seedy motel. I also have delusions that if I end myself and my family, I'll move on to the next string of life and jump ahead or over. It's hard to explain. I'll also drive aimlessly without realizing until I'm miles away from my destination. But my meds work wonders. I'm all good right now as long as I don't resist treatment. You have to wonder how many people in life have put themselves and their loved ones through enormous hardship and tragedy, either because they were in a time or place where they couldn't be treated, or how many people could be treated now but who refuse treatment or are denied. Look at the difference in this person's life and tell me it couldn't go very badly without intervention of some sort. When I was younger, I was in the living room at around 5 or 6 a.m., just when the sun was coming up and everything was all blue. I looked around for a second and saw a pale white girl with sunken-in eyes just staring back at me. It took around 5 seconds of frozen staring for me to blink and for the figure to just be a vacuum cleaner again. A few years later, I was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia for some other reasons. For example, I've been seeing floating orbs and shadow people and animals for a while. Kind of trying to be careful describing it because I don't want to bring them back. If I were to describe them, they're like flowing water in a way. Pitch black, slightly see-through, and they move in very unnatural ways. The physics are always slightly off. They usually vanish once you look straight at them, but occasionally they've been there for hours, and only when I reach out to pet them, thinking they're my actual pets, I realize they were never there. I'm pretty sure most of the people who've lived in a haunted house have some form of mild psychosis or schizophrenia. I kinda always felt off or distant. When I was 8, I asked to go to therapy because I noticed that my emotions weren't rational. It's been a strange old life ever since. I spent 30 minutes hovering over my sleeping boyfriend with a pillow. He was a heavy sleeper. I could have ended him. I almost did. Then I woke him up and sent him home, much to his confusion. I spent 10 minutes on hold with my psychiatrist's nurse. I was already being treated for depression, and booked an appointment and hauled myself to the clinic. I waited 3 hours to be seen, told him everything, got a script, went straight to the pharmacy, got my pills and took them immediately. I've done my best to try and stay medicated properly ever since. Of course, I grew up knowing my mother had a mental illness, so I was typically very educated about the whole thing. Otherwise, that boyfriend would have likely been dead since 2008. To answer some questions, it wasn't after a fight. I was just aware things were coming to an end. The relationship wasn't meant to be. In the heat of the moment, I had the idea that if I finished him off, he'd die as my boyfriend. It's not logical. I've always struggled with thoughts like this, but this was the first and so far only time that I've almost committed homicide. By and large, I struggle more with thoughts that make me a danger to myself. But because my schizophrenia often causes me to become catatonic, I've mostly avoided attempts on my own life. In Harry Potter terms, my brain performs petrificus totalis when thinking of self-deleting. Medical mishaps so awkward you'll feel second-hand shame. It was 6 years ago when I was 18. I'd been in my first year of college, so needless to say, my student diet wasn't that great. My boyfriend and I were house-sitting for a friend, and on the third night there, I was awoken to the most terrible stabbing pain in my stomach. I tried to get to the bathroom, but I ended up collapsing on the floor in a near-fetal position, barely able to breathe and sweating profusely. My boyfriend hears me fall and gets up to see what's wrong. I can't speak. The pain is so great and I'm having a hard time breathing, so he painstakingly leads me to our friend's car and drives me to the hospital. At this point, I'm in so much pain from him not really knowing how to drive a stick and jerking and stalling all the way that he has to go in and ask for assistance. I'm loaded into a gurney and strapped in because the outstretched position nearly kills me with pain and I start lashing out. After the doctors cut off my clothes and see no outward injuries on my stomach, he begins to compress on my stomach, which nearly makes me pass out. He thinks my appendix must have burst or that I had a ruptured intestine. I'm administered IV morphine and I finally get some relief. They roll me down the hall and start taking some scans of my stomach. To get the x-rays back takes a while, so while we were all awaiting the pics, I was administered some more morphine. Eventually, a big woman with a Texas accent enters the room and exclaims, "You're full of crap." "What?" I ask, completely confused and holding my stomach. "I'm serious, I'm in a lot of pain." "Oh, no doubt," she said, and pulled out an x-ray of my stomach. "You see all that white in your guts?" She points with her pen and traces all the way up from my butthole through my large intestines. "You're literally full of it. I've never seen someone so full of crap in my life." My boyfriend erupts in laughter, and the nurse is trying her best to hide her amusement, as she's been tending me through the hours and knows that I'm obviously in a lot of pain. I groan, but I'm a bit amused myself. It was pretty funny after all. I asked the doctor what they were going to do about it, and she said that they were going to do an enema and see how that went. I was given laxatives and a ton of water and told to wait 20 minutes. I can feel my stomach rumbling a bit at this point, and it hurts me a lot when it does. Eventually, a nurse wheels in what looks like a rack fit for a leather-clad professional's basement, complete with ankle and wrist straps. My boyfriend, again, erupts into a fit of laughter. I'm not amused this time. I'm starting to get a bit embarrassed, so before we begin, I ask that he leave. He pretty much begs me to let him stay, but I'm having none of it. After he leaves, the nurse wheels in what looks to be some sort of futuristic pressure washer. I'm pretty much right. She straps my ankles and wrists to the rack in an upright position and proceeds to insert the tube into my butt. It's uncomfortable and cold, but hey, I'm gay, so it's like, whatever. Then she turns it on, and like the first mate on the Titanic, begins to slowly increase power and pressure. I can feel and see my stomach begin to inflate slightly, and oh mercy does it hurt like nothing else. It felt like knives were pushing out of me somehow, ever so slowly. I cry out, but she insists, "More power!" And I keep filling up like a balloon, hollering in agony. After a minute of constant pressure, she turns it off and tells me to clench up because she's removing the tube. I want nothing more than to do just the opposite, but I assume she knows what she's doing and I follow orders. She then attached another tube to a hose and inserts that. This one is much bigger and the tube is cold as F. But again, I'm gay, so it's still whatever. She then proceeds to hoover my motherfrickin' insides. After 30 seconds, I hear a, I ask her what the problem is and she told me nothing was coming out, but I beg her not to pressure wash my guts again. At this time, the doc comes in as she's pulling out my rear end plug and informs me that the number 2 is packed in my colon too wide in girth to be machine enemaed out. She was going to have to do this manually. She, the doctor, has the nurse grab a bucket, a plain white janitor's bucket, and put it underneath me. She then puts on latex gloves, completely lubricates up her hands, and begins what I consider to be some sort of exploratory drilling with them to loosen me up. After a while of this, I was trying to keep my mind focused on something, anything other than this butch PE teacher-looking southern woman, doing something other men would probably pay a professional for. She brings out a stretching device and begins to open me up with it. At this point, I feel so ashamed of myself, but I'm also medicated out of my mind. The pain begins to come back in full force and I start shouting for more painkillers, but Lady MacGyver down there tells me that they can't give me more because it will stop me up even more. I'm going to have to just deal with it until they can unclog me. So I endure as I'm being stretched. It hurts like hell down my hole too. I feel her fingers in there and she tells me to push. So I push. I push so hard that I feel like blood vessels on my face are popping. My head starts to bang. I'm pushing hard and she's telling me to push more. I must have been screaming my head off. I can't imagine that I wasn't. Finally, I feel something give. She told me to push more, and I did. I could feel things moving. So I pushed some more. After a minute, I feel myself finally deflating as water and poopy debris tumble out into the bucket. It all happened very quickly after that. I was unobstructed and gushing hot lava a minute later, and finally felt complete, utter, blissful relief. I was told after I woke up in the hospital 8 hours later at around 5 p.m. that the doc literally helped deliver my turd baby. I'd never been more embarrassed in my life, but as time passes and my humor evolves, I find myself laughing about it. I changed my diet immediately after, and I've got a good healthy bowel movement at least once a day now. I found it strange how my depression lifted a lot after that. I'd been severely depressed for a couple of weeks before, and I found out that being constipated does that. Just an FYI, some in the medical profession call that the devil's Pez dispenser. Every time they get a little ball of duty out, the next one just pops right up waiting to be flicked out. Ugh. In short, got severely constipated, so much so that I had to go to the ER where enemas and laxatives didn't work. A woman doctor had to crank my butthole open and help me deliver a fecal baby with her hands. One night back in high school, I woke up with ungodly stomach pains in the middle of the night. I spent an hour in the bathroom trying to throw up or go number 2 so the pain would go away. Eventually, my mother drove me to the hospital, and after half an hour in the ER, I finally got a room. The nurse came in to do all the pre-doctor stuff, and the moment she leaves, I let rip a giant toot and felt 100% better. We left shortly after that, and yes, it was awkward. My father is a nurse. He used to be an ER nurse. He now works in patient transport, which is a bit less nutty. He once came home from a night shift and said to me, with a straight face, "You know you're a trained professional when you manage to keep a straight face while taking a lava lamp out of a woman." I did not stop laughing for a solid minute. I got circumcised at 13. After the bloody mess and smelly cauterized skin, the doc pointed to some towels for me to wipe off with and left the room. After I was finished, the doctor, my mum and I had a brief debrief of the operation, and he boasted and elaborated to my mother how many stitches he had to use because my member was so large. To be perfectly honest, it's average at best. My mother had the most awkward face I've ever seen. This pretty young nurse used to hang out in my room in the couple of days before my surgery. She gave me company, and I was her escape from rude old men, I guess. She always smelled nice. So the surgery was at the end of my spine, or top of my butt, basically. I was a hairy mofo even in high school. So this one time she comes in with breakfast, and I'm like, "Hey," and she's got dead eyes and a stone face. "Turn around, please." I do, and off comes the gown, and she starts shaving my butt for the next hour. It was never the same afterwards.
For an hour? Oh my god.
Today I learned there are hospitals that treat Wookiees. When I was about 10, I had an abscess in my butt, like right next to my hole. I went to the doctor's office to get it checked out, and they decided they had to pop it. I'd gotten these things semi-often, and I had to operate away some tissue or something. I still have a scar there. Anyway, the nurse that drew the shortest straw had to pop an abscess inside a 10-year-old's keister. It might be that it was kind of big or that it was under a lot of pressure, but she got sprayed by a pus fountain from my butt. In short, sprayed a nurse with butt pus. I mean, I guess it's not too embarrassing, but I gave birth 2 weeks ago to a baby not made of poop like that first person, and I got an epidural. Apparently those things make it impossible to hold in your gas. I did not know that. My technique was talking loudly every time I tooted.
This, my friends, is why medical professionals are paid well. It's not the decade of intense schooling, it's the fact that they're showered in every form of bodily expulsion possible.
I finally started having bedroom fun when I turned 18. I knew about the doing of the deed, where babies came from and stuff, all thanks to my life skills classes at school. So my boyfriend and I at the time had protected fun with the proper safety measures in place 99.9% of the time we did the deed. He was paranoid. Well, we slipped up once, but I thought, hey, no big deal, I'm on birth control anyway. Weeks later, I'm a couple of hours away from taking a test for class, and I get these cold sweats. I'm talking extreme. Then I get this ridiculous pain close to where I thought my ovaries were. I felt like I was dying. Of course, I googled my symptoms, and the first thing to pop up was an ectopic pregnancy. I immediately panicked. I went to my professor, who saw that I was in no state to even come to class, and who sent me home. I asked my friend to drive me to the ER. I saw the doctor and I told him of my suspicions. He asked me what I'd eaten that day and pushed down on certain areas of my stomach. Turns out the food I ate and the time I ate it gave me gas that got trapped. In short, thought I was pregnant, turned out to be gas. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? When I was around 15, I had this heavier set friend that, when he didn't feel like it, wouldn't go number 2. He'd just hold it in until the pain went away. One day we were playing Nintendo and he was squirming all over the place. "What's your problem?" I say. "I've got to go," he says. "So go," I say. "I don't want to," he says. "Besides, I haven't gone for a few days and I don't want to sit on the toilet for an hour." "You haven't crapped in 3 days?" "Probably longer. And if I go now, I'll have to sit on the toilet for a while, and I want to play games. Don't worry, it'll go away." After like 30 minutes of squirming, he says, "Okay, I'm good." And we continue playing video games like nothing happened. A couple of days later at his house, and he can no longer hold it. "I'm gonna be in here a while, dude," he says to me. After like an hour and a half, he comes out and says, "Hey, come here." Not even thinking about it, I stroll over. He says, "Check that out." From my view, I can see the brown all the way up the bowl. And I'm ashamed to say that curiosity of the sheer size made me look to see the rest. It was about half the size of a baseball bat and easily just as thick. I couldn't believe it came out of a person. All the while, he was laughing. He couldn't even flush it. He took a broom handle and broke it in half first, and even then he clogged the toilet. The next week, I ask him if he's brewing up one of his super turds, and he tells me he clogged the toilet so bad that his mum And he tells me he clogged the toilet so bad his mum made him take dumps at the McDonald's down the street. He said he'd leave them in a bowl unflushed as a surprise to people. I'm not crapping you. Your friend has issues. Yes, but that was never in dispute here. Oh my god, so many crappy stories, pardon the pun. But seriously, half of these stories are about toots and turds, which is incidentally going to be the name of my off-brand Febreze product. Let's try to take a break from some of the excrement here. My dad. Dad has never had a major surgery in his life. He has what's known as white coat syndrome. He can't stand the sight of blood. It's an outright panic if it's his own. And he damn near passes out when needles are being put in, even if it's not into him. He avoids hospitals and doctors at all costs. The one time he's been in the hospital for anything serious, they had to sedate him. I've had 3 shoulder surgeries, a knee surgery, and had my gallbladder removed. Every time I go to the hospital for the surgery, my dad seems to be the one to take me there, and for some reason we've never changed that. We keep making the same stupid mistake over and over again. When I got my first shoulder surgery, I forget what they called it, but it was a series of shots to numb the nerve endings in my shoulder. I think it was somewhere around 8 to 10 shots, all around my shoulder. This is where we figured out Dad shouldn't be present in pre-op because he just isn't comforting to me. The medical staff had to stop working on me to work on him. The anesthesiologist laid out all of the needles, and I looked over at my dad, who was sitting behind me, and said, "Are you okay?" And he tried like hell to act tough with a manly, "Yeah, I'm fine. Why do you ask?" Even though he was horribly pale. Anesthesiologist puts the first shot in me. I don't cringe, but I hear my dad go, "Oh God," under his breath. The second shot goes in, and the anesthesiologist had to stop because my dad was going to faint. They got him calmed down and asked him if he wanted to stay here or go out into the waiting room. He tried to brave it out and made it through one more shot and said, "I'll be in the waiting room," and got up and left. The nurses later went to check on him to make sure he was okay. After the surgery, one of the nurses jokingly said, "Don't worry, your dad's going to be just fine. He made it through without a problem," as I was laying in post-op. The second 2 shoulder surgeries and the knee surgery, he decided to wait them out in the waiting room from the beginning. When my gallbladder decided that it was done doing what it was supposed to be doing, the doctors decided it needed to come out, and that was a bit of a different story. It was a quick onset. I went from, "Hey, I have a little pain in my abdomen," to, "Holy crap, my insides are on fire, make it stop," in a matter of hours. My dad had to come and pick me up. The only comfortable place I could find was laying face down on the cool tiles of my kitchen floor, with my arms stretched out like I was making a snow angel, just face down. It only reduced the pain and didn't stop it. If I moved in the slightest, it resulted in unbearable agony. I made it to the ER and they're trying to check me in. I'm just sweating and barely coherent enough to answer questions. It's all shady to me, because the doctor did some preliminary pushing on my stomach and decided what it was, and we just needed an ultrasound to back it up. I was in so much pain they pumped me full of pain relievers after about 10 minutes of me being there. So I'm now dosed up in pre-op. I have an IV shunt, I think it's called a shunt, in my arm, and the nurse says, "We're going to bring your father back so he can keep you company. You've got a few minutes before your surgery." I tried to say, "Just leave him in the waiting room," but I was just out of it. She thought it was just the meds talking. He comes into the pre-op room. He sits down as the doctors and nurses are walking in and out of my room. He's sitting in the chair, staring at my IV shunt. He has the armrests gripped to the point where his knuckles are just turning white. He is not saying a word. The doctors and nurses just keep doing what they're doing. I'm kind of awake, but doped up in the bed. I then hear one of the nurses say, "Oh my God, are you all right?" And I answered, "Hell yeah, I'm doing great." I was pumped full of the good stuff. I probably could have had one of my arms hacked off right at that point and I wouldn't have felt it. Needless to say, she was talking to my father. The white coats, the nurses, the needles, and the monitors were just too much for him. He had worked himself into a frenzy. His face was all red, he was sweating, still grasping onto the chair like we were about to break the sound barrier, and I really think he was on the verge of passing out. In my dopey state of mind, I looked over at him and said, "What the hell, butthole? I'm the one they're cutting open. What are you so nervous about?" He didn't answer. 2 nurses started tending to him and got him calmed down, and back out to the waiting room he went. I think they checked on him more than they checked on me. I didn't see him again until I had my street clothes back on and I was sitting in a rocking chair with a cup of coffee and some cookies. He was jealous I had cookies, so the nurses bought him some. They were so awesome to him. I was apologetic about it, but they were completely cool with it all. I sincerely like more of the nurses I've dealt with than most of those surgeons and doctors I've dealt with. It's nice that he tries to be there when he can, he just can't handle it, and it's horribly funny to me. Whenever he tries to play up that he's more manly than me, I just bring up the surgeries and the subject quickly changes. Mum later told me that it was the exact same way when my sister and I were born. She also had a surgery when my sister and I were in our early teens. She actually told my dad to just stay home. He did. My grandmother ended up staying with her instead. The real fun started after he retired and he was bored. He decided he wanted to see what it was like for someone to get tattooed. I have a half-leg tattoo, plus about a half dozen others. When I went to get work on it, he decided he wanted to go and see what it was like. So he followed me to the shop. My tattoo artist shows me the needle and I hear my dad go, "Ugh." The tattoo artist tunes his machine, hits the pedal once to see how the needle is moving, and as soon as it made the buzz sound, Dad said, "See you at home," and left. The tattoo artist didn't even get ink on the needle yet. Whenever he and I talk, he jokingly asks, "So, when's your dad coming in for his tattoo?" In short, Dad does worse at hospitals than the person who he's there to comfort. Well, your dad seems like a sweet guy to try and be there for you despite the immense physical trials for him. I don't even want to know what it would be like for him to try and get any sort of operation himself. Wild. I snapped my banjo, the delicate piece of skin that circumcised people don't have. Very, very painful and bloody. I had a wart frozen off the inside of my skin on my ding-dong. By the inside, I mean you had to roll it fully down, and the wart was located just underneath the bottom of the head. The most awkward place ever. The only way for the area to not touch any other part of my eggplant was to hold the skin back. That was impossible, so I settled for using tissue to create a barrier. Discovered that TP will glue itself to the head and takes a very long time to get off. I had a rash develop on my left armpit when I was 18. It was awful. So bad that it looked like one of those frosty burns which kids used to give each other with cans of deodorant. I assumed that I was an idiot and had given myself a frosty by using deodorant too vigorously. Eventually I went to the doctor and I explained how I'd given myself a frosty. He just looked at me for a while before saying, "I don't know what a frosty is and I don't condone those, but I can tell you that this is impetigo, a rash mainly developed by dirty 2 to 5-year-olds. In a similar vein to that first guy's story, I too was once constipated. I was roughly 12 or 13 at the time and didn't really know about constipation. Every now and then a tiny nugget would pop out and I simply thought that's all the poop I had to do. Until one sunny afternoon I experienced a bad cramp in my gut. A contraction, if you will. I spoke to my mother, who's a nurse at a hospital, and I explained my predicament. We went to our local doctor and he explained that I had a backlog. And it could really do with being evacuated. Quite soon, in fact. Looking back on this, it did take place over about 9 months. I was checked into another hospital, not the one my mother worked at, and administered suppositories. No effect. I then received an enema. This also had no effect. Over the course of the next 2 days, I received another set of suppositories and 2 more enemas. Then, one night while I was asleep, my body just let its guard down. I awoke with another contraction, and feeling the imminent doom that was about to escape my butt, I headed for the lavatory. As I sat down on the toilet, I heard what can only be described as the gates of hell being opened, and felt my body literally become about 5 pounds lighter in 3 seconds. My entire lower body went numb. As I tried to move, the small of my back ached. I called for a nurse, and after being helped back to bed, I overheard the words, "waste team," being said. I spent the next 10 hours in a deep sleep, whilst I spent the next day in a wheelchair, before being able to use my legs again, and that toilet was out of use for 3 more days. I think they had to replace it. When I was 12, my school district required any kids going out for sports to have a physical. This included the whole, don't drink, don't smoke, let's take your blood pressure, check your vitals, everything. Well, the last and most embarrassing part for a 12-year-old boy is having the doctor examine your groin for hernia. Luckily for me, I got a smoking hot female med student to perform my physical. I managed to pop a rigid one right around the time she asked me to remove my shorts. She tried to act very professional while examining my newly developed manhood before exclaiming, "I'm sorry, but isn't he too young to get one of those?" before bursting out in laughter and leaving the room. Her supervising physician, a male, finished the exam while trying to hold back awkward giggles of his own. Meanwhile, my father was wiping back tears of hysteria after witnessing what he was certain to be the most humiliating moment of his son's entire life. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all of the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.